Fuzzy dice, check. Whack-a-con bobblehead doll, check.
Alright, what's going on, everyone? Thank you guys so much for hanging out, by the way. Thank you guys for waiting while we got our audio issues sorted. I am gonna unmute Skype right now. We have been having a little bit of tech issues, but we are all sorted right now. I hope. As you can see, I've got my guests with me, finally. And sorry for making you guys wait. So we have, hopefully, a great show for you guys. I'm just going to move my camera over a little bit. Hopefully we have a great show for you guys. Lots of DM talk, all kinds of topics that we're going to cover today. Greetings, by the way. And thank you so much, Shortmanian444, for following before. Welcome to the madness, my friend. Also, By the Sword. Both of those guys hit that follow button while they were waiting. And we graciously appreciate it. So, we're going to dive right into it. I'm going to put on some background, some fantasy music in the background. And before we dive right into it, I do want to get to some announcements. So, as you can see, the upcoming schedule has just been updated. So, we have the new name of that mystery game that I was playing in on Encounter Roleplay. It's called Outlanders, and it is ridiculous. So you definitely want to be there and check it out. It's a lot of fun. I'm gonna wait till my guys are introducing themselves, and I'm gonna tweet that we are back up. Also, this Sunday, first session of the new Jade Regent campaign. You guys definitely want to be there. We did some session prep this past weekend, and also I did what I had promised, which was reading out every single name of people that have followed this channel since our last Tuesday show when Matt was on. I didn't get a chance to thank all you guys during the show because there was just way too many, and so I read all of them out. So if you were one of the new followers, you got thanked personally. And again, thank you so much. And also, tomorrow, Wednesday, Call of Cthulhu on Encounter Roleplay. With me and Mythomatic and Scarstar and Ginger Snapper. It's amazing. It's a lot of fun. So I've got two great guests with me today, and I am going to let them introduce themselves. Also, I should probably change that follower goal because we are well past 500 now. So why don't we start on this side, on my left, with Mr. James Introcaso. How are you doing, James?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me here, Brian. I am super duper excited to get exploded today. I am a host of the Tome Show podcast. I have two podcasts on that network. One's called The Roundtable. It's a weekly D&D news panel show. The other one is called Gamer to Gamer. That's more of a monthly interview with designers and other people who work in the industry. And then I'm also a game designer myself, who has most recently put out an adventure with Roll20 that is available for free called The Master's Vault. It's a starter adventure if you're new to Roll20, if you're new to D&D. This is the adventure for you. Takes about 2 to 3 hours to play, and it is a blast and totally free, just like Roll20. So check that out.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll delve into talking about it. By the way, thank you, Fix It Geek, for pointing out that I don't know if you guys know, my Minicam switches my cameras, so when I'm pointing right on the screen, it's actually pointing left. So I always get confused every single episode. I'm still not used to it. So thank you, Fix It Geek, for reminding everyone that I'm horrible at this. And holy shit, my phone is ringing. Guy, why don't you introduce yourself while I go turn that off?
Right, hello everybody. I'm also very excited to be here, coming to you from South Africa, where it's 2 a.m. in the morning, so that's why I look like I've been hit by a bus. But very excited to join you guys on the Twitch, and I run several channels on YouTube where we look at role-playing specifically from the Game Master perspective, from the player perspective, and I host a role-playing session as well. But I will shortly be on Roll20 because I quite like the idea of that module that you've written to help people through D20, Roll20. I've never felt like such a novice. I tried that the other day, and I was like, where do I click? What do I do? How do I do this kind of stuff? So,
well, it's one of those things, Guy. If I can do it, anyone can do it. So, especially one of the greatest GMs out there. So it is a real pleasure for me to meet you. So thanks for being up at, I don't know, what time is it there in South Africa right now?
2:15 in the morning.
Wow.
2:15 on a Wednesday. So Tuesday night goes well for me. I always find it weird, the time zone. Yeah. So, but anyway, no, that's fantastic. I mean, I've done quite a bit of, well, not quite a bit. I've done some stuff for Roll20. And it's a different kind of experience, role playing, isn't it? Because it's not, you don't have that personality around the table.
Mm-hmm.
You're just relying on little thumbnails of people playing. Do you do tabletop role playing as well as the Roll20 stuff?
I do, and I would say there's definitely there's a difference. You know, Roll20 is great. It lets you do a lot of things, and it lets you play remotely, which is the biggest thing that it does. But there's like a pacing thing that when you're playing online, because the distraction is right there, the screen is right there, it's literally one click away. You really need to be aware of your pacing and not spend too much time looking up rules and that kind of thing. Or even like side conversations can't happen the same way because you can't whisper to somebody at the table. Everybody hears it when you say it. So you really need to get everybody focused and engaged as quickly as possible and keep them there. I would say that's the biggest difference. So
I actually had 2 players drop from. By the way, I'm sorry, I answered a phone. Someone was calling me to ask me, "Hey, can you teach me how to live stream?" I was like, I'll call you back. I'm in the middle of a show right now. I had 2 people quit a game a while ago because we were playing on Roll20, and they were like, you know, this is cool and all, but we're playing on Skype. I don't really like the inability to have a side conversation with someone, you know, because it's like you're on Skype, only really one person can be like multiple people can be talking, but you can't talk while other people are doing something, and they weren't really into that. They kind of wanted to be able to have asides and stuff to themselves.
One of the things that I've done, because I've got friends in the States and in the UK who have wanted to role play in the past using Skype, and it's a slightly different experience to Roll20, is that they all get together in a room and then they Skype through to me and then I run the game for them. So then they get that familiarity of being around a table and being able to chat to one another. Of course, for me then as a game master, I lose out on the ability to listen in on their conversations.
Yeah. And
of course, draw inspiration from them. But it does cross the barrier quite nicely in terms of...
Yeah, I was actually talking with one of my players, Trendane, who is he's a voice actor and stuff, and we were just talking about, and I've mentioned this to a few other people. I primarily run my games on Roll20 these days, mostly because anyone that I used to play D&D with is long since moved away, and doing their own thing, and it's like I'm too old to go out and find a new group of friends to play games with. Like it gets very difficult when you get to be my age. And so, I do a lot of Roll20 gaming, and I it's fine. I love it. I love the streaming thing, but I always find myself sitting in this chair, and my natural I really want to set up a studio to do this, where I can literally have a camera that's pointed not at me sitting in a chair, but me standing up as if I were standing at a DM screen, because I always have that inclination. I want to move around, I want to do stuff, and I it's just being here on camera is a little bit kind of different than that. And also I've mentioned this once or twice before. Actually, I'm kind of thankful that I don't have a real life gaming group, because back when I played, you didn't spend money on anything. You spent money on your rulebook maybe, and that's it. Whatever. Everything was like paper. Or drew a map on. But it's like these days with with Dwarven Forge and the like the Reaper miniatures and like just all these things. It's like if I had a group that played around a table, all of my money would go into stuff that I didn't need, like dice boxes and dice sets and Dwarven Forge. And it's like thank God I have a reason not to spend money on that.
Have you checked out the Roll20 marketplace, because you can spend a fair amount of money on maps and minis and stuff there.
I do spend a little bit of money on maps, mostly from my boy Gabriel Picard. He's my dude. And by the way, if you haven't checked out his maps, they're awesome. But thankfully, I'm an illustrator and a graphic designer by trade, so I just make my own stuff. And
there you go.
I have all my tokens and stuff come from, like, I wanted to use those top-down tokens that look really cool. This was back when Roll20 was when everyone was just coming to them. We all had those couple packs of top-down tokens. I'm like, these look really cool. I'd love to use them, but there aren't enough that I can get every monster that I need, so it's whatever. And I'm not the kind of guy that can use like some that look one way and some that look the other. So I have to, in Photoshop, I have a template. It's a circle template that I just put images into to make tokens out of. And I've actually made it so like I have a small like one that takes up the box, but the circle's actually smaller. So it's like it looks like a goblin-sized circle compared to like a human-sized circle. And I have special ones for like boss enemies and stuff. It cuts down my prep time because I do a lot of it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think having those abilities, and also the ability to just drag stuff in, is one of the things that makes a virtual table better to play at, because you're not necessarily drawing out a map, you're not setting up the Dwarven Forge. If you're playing a game that requires you use that stuff, obviously Theater of the Mind is, and you can still do Theater of the Mind over Roll20 as well. But it is great to be able to drag something on, and it is great for like if you're at a virtual table and you have a dynamic lighting feature.
Oh yeah.
That I have never in a game I've played had vision and light matter, really. Like, oh, you've got dark vision, okay, somebody lit a torch, all right, we're not going to worry about it anymore. Whereas in a virtual table, you can put those settings in so the person with the torch only sees 20 feet, but the person with the dark vision can see 60 feet, and and they're none the wiser. So that is fun and immersive, and I think that's one of the things is when you're on a virtual table, if you can take advantage of that kind of thing, it helps keep the player engagement up, which you don't necessarily need at the table when you're doing Theater of the Mind, because you're going for something else when you're doing that. You're telling a different kind of story, and that's totally fine. But yeah, it is. There are different challenges, I think, to both. And being around a table is just, with a bunch of friends, it's great, right? Like, be it virtual or not, it's awesome.
Yeah, I actually, anyone who knows me and who has played on Roll20 with me, which is a small number of people, but they know that I've been all over the spectrum. I remember back, and this must have been 3 years ago now, maybe a little bit more, way back when Roll20 was like just come out of its Kickstarter, it just launched officially, and like everyone was kind of flocking to it, and we were all playing our first campaigns on Roll20 and learning how it worked. And I had a DM who he was a good guy. He was really fun to interact with. His NPCs were a ton of fun to play with, but he just could not be bothered with the actual the Roll20 he would get a picture of like a market square, and he'd just drag it onto the screen, and it would just awkwardly kind of size, so like the tables in the market were like 5 times the size of the players, and it just never. And it was one of those things where I think stuff like that kind of informed me as a DM, where it's like, I never want to do that. I always want to do, because it doesn't take a ton of time to set up dynamic lighting, and I use a ton of API scripts that make my life a lot easier, and it's like, it doesn't take a ton of time to do, and the effort is so much, like, you can see it just so much more, like, just from a player angle. You know, I think it's something the players really appreciate. You know, they like having tokens that look nice. They like having a map that's actually that's set up in an interesting way. Like, it doesn't. You don't need to track to keep your all players having like light sources and stuff. But if you do, it's just that extra step. And here's the thing: is every DM puts their effort into a different place. Every DM preps differently. For me,
Yep.
building the maps and working on the maps and setting them up is where a lot of my prep time goes, because while I'm doing that, I'm thinking of what I'm going to be doing in those dungeons and in those locations. Like, like, rather than just sitting down with a pad and saying like, okay, I've got a dungeon, what's going on in this room, how does this person react this way, like, I just think about that stuff while I'm setting it up, and that's how my prep works. Other people work differently. Some people can't be bothered with the dynamic lighting and stuff because, I don't know, it's just too much work for them or something, and I don't fault them for that. It's, we all prep in different ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And don't watch some of my videos on my channel, because a lot of it I talk about how some people need their maps, and they need to see where everybody is within a room. They need to see exact positioning and that kind of stuff.
I'm that guy.
Right? Right. But me personally, I mean, when I was growing up, all I used to do was draw maps. And I mean, I've got a folio of hundreds of maps of dungeons and castles and everything you could speak of. But I found that it eventually got too restrictive, because I couldn't control the time properly. So one of the last videos that I've just spoken about actually is how, if you ignore the geography, it allows you as the game master to really just make it more about the drama than you're 3.5 foot away, you're this away, you're that away, you're that, But again, I think that's, as you say, it's different types of GMing, and it's different types of role playing. And online, it's a different scenario. You have people who don't necessarily, you can't look down at a piece of paper and go, oh, well, we're about that far away. So you have to do that prep, I think.
Yeah. And I think online, it's great to have something for your players to look at, again, so they're not drawn to Facebook when maybe you're in a heavy RP scene with one character and everybody else is just sitting by. But I've definitely run Theater of the Mind on Roll20, and it has gone, it's gone fine and it's gone well, especially when I am, if I haven't done the map prep work and it's like, oh man, now I need to search for the map I need. Now I need to drag it on. Now I need to make sure it's sized correctly. Now I need to get all the tokens on. If I feel like that could kill the game just as much, right? So I'll be like, okay, guys, we're going Theater of the Mind. I drag the monster token on just to, keep track of hit points or whatever, and to get their initiative tracker going, and then it's on. So, I think it really is a situation. And at the table, I use Theater of the Mind like all the time, just because it is so much easier than drawing out with a wet erase or that kind of thing. And it does, you get those lovely questions from players that are like, is there, so, we're at a farm, what are the crops like? Oh, they're dry? Okay, I'm going to light this whole field on fire, which maybe wouldn't be a thing if you had a picture of some nice green crops, So you get those kinds of moments, which are great.
No, absolutely.
I'm a little bit different than that, because I think when my groups tend to prefer, or some of the people I've played with tend to prefer, more exact kind of battlefield setup situation. Also in the same way that like people will tell you, oh, someone who's really really heavy into the rules of the game or cares a lot about like the crunch aspect of their character and stuff is a bad player. But then again, like, I play with people who some of their fun comes from the fact that they can say like, like they can understand the rules and they can make use of them. Like, I certainly wouldn't begrudge that. Just like I don't begrudge anyone who really likes a map. I love maps. I'm a visual thinker. If you give me a really detailed map to look at while I'm fighting something, like here's the thing, like I could describe a really in fact I'll just do a situation just recently. I played Curse of the Crimson Throne on Fridays, and there's a room in the dungeon that the players just went into last session. They opened these trapped big skeleton painted doors, and inside they find a room that is completely, like, the walls and the floor are lined with thick pane glass, and behind the glass on both the walls and the floor are hundreds of, like, writhing animated undead bodies, just like broken limbs kind of clawing at the glass just inches away from the players. It is a horrible room, and it's an amazing description, and your players will kind of pull a face when you describe it to them. It's even more interesting when they can, when on a map you delete like that, or you kind of take away the door on the dynamic lighting layer, and they actually see all of those bodies there, and they have the same reaction that their character would upon opening that door. Like, to me, there's just as much narrative there in the image that I don't necessarily have to explain, because they see it. It's right there for them. And then once they enter the room, we start describing it and they get the full picture. But it's like, for me, it works. I enjoy that. And plus, I like the tactical combat. It's fun for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that old adage about a picture being worth 1,000 words is certainly true, right? And you get to really then control stylistically your player's imagination, because there have been times I've described a new creature and my players have laughed when the reaction I wanted was horrified, right? And I'm like, what did I do wrong? So it helps to have a picture that's done in a horrific style, or as you just described, terrible, So which is great. Like, that's what you were going for. You wanted people to feel that sense of oh my God, how horrible, right? I think that is definitely true. And I also, to the point of tactical combat, like, the only bad players are the ones who ruin the fun for other people for no reason. Absolutely. If you love power gaming, if you love tactical thinking, if you love, role playing, if you love storytelling, whatever it is, whatever gets you into the game, if you just love hanging out with your friends and laughing, and that's why you're there, like, you're doing it right. If you're having fun and you're not ruining it for anybody else, you're doing it right. If you're telling someone they're playing wrong, then you're probably not doing it right. You know. So,
absolutely, without doubt. But to maybe show my age a little bit, this was before the age of computers, when we could do all this preparation. Friends and I, we wanted to try and take our game to the next level, using miniatures and that kind of thing. And we went, well, how do we build a dungeon so that we can do that with a grid? And the challenge was that if you built the dungeon as a miniature on the tabletop, the players could then see it.
Yeah,
that's right. So what we did was we built this elaborate dungeon, and we actually had two dungeon masters, or two game masters, running the game. One of us was responsible for narrative, and the other one was responsible for moving the bed sheet over the model, revealing the rooms as they kind of explored it, type of thing.
Yeah.
That kind of worked, but there was more effort involved than it was worth, really.
That's actually not, I mean, it may be an old technique, but it's certainly not a dead technique. I don't know if you watch Critical Role, but you could see they did that with the dragon dungeon not too long ago. It's like they're walking into this cave and he's like pulling the blanket over the dwarven forge, like revealing it piece by piece, and it's like, I guess it's, if it works, don't knock it. But again, I think Dwarven Forge is cool. I know a lot of people, like, I listened to one of my favorite, before I was like doing this, which is hanging out with DMs and talking shop and DM philosophy and stuff, and just sort of working on the craft. Back before then, I still wanted to learn to be a better DM, and so I sought out people I could listen to and stuff that did things better than I did. And I remember listening to a podcast a very, very long time ago where they were playing Tomb of Horrors. It was a great podcast. The DM was great. The group was a lot of fun. And they were using Dwarven Forge. And basically, you know, it was a situation where just like even before all that, you would have a graph paper and like you would draw the room as like you wouldn't use a map out of the book because they didn't print them at high enough resolution that you could use them out of the book. They gave you a map and you were supposed to draw your own version of it. And that's basically what they were doing, is every time they went into the room, the DM would have to like build the room out of Dwarven Forge, but it wasn't like a whole interconnected dungeon. It was just like hallway and then the room, you know, and then we take the pieces off that we're not going to use over here and put them over here. And that's, you know, that's great. I am way too lazy for that. So that's why I like, you know, I like being able to create a whole dungeon, because that's what I do in Photoshop. I just create my whole dungeon map as like an art project, and I love, you know, the players being, I don't have to reveal it because the players see it as they walk through it, you know, and the surprises are still there. And basically anything I can do that allows me to be lazier, I will probably do.
Oh,
that's
nice.
how I work as a DM, I think.
It's not lazy if you're being efficient.
Yeah,
there's a difference.
No, I say lazy, but there was a thing I heard, and I know Will said it to me, but I don't remember the context. Will from Encounter Roleplay, but what he said resonated, I think, pretty well, which is as a DM, what you should endeavor to do, because one of the questions we get a lot when we have on my talk show and just when we hang out and talk DM stuff is, you know, how do I get better at prepping, you know, or how do I prepare for a session better? How do I learn to, you know, to whatever? And we all prep. That's a thing we're all going to have to do. But the goal should always be to, like, if it takes you 4 hours to prepare a dungeon, then the next time you do it, you should endeavor to make it take 2 hours, but get the same amount of stuff done. Mm-hmm. And whether that be by shorthanding your notes or cutting down the information you actually need to write down and keep, you know, and remember yourself because you have tables and you have quick references, like anything you can do to cut down your prep time but get the same amount of work done is what you should be seeking as a DM, because the less time we prep, the more time we have to spend on other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's a request that comes through on our channels as well. Is people want to see what my preparation notes look like, and one of the reasons why I've been really reluctant to show them what my prep notes look like is usually it's a disaster of 3 names and like an idea, and a spider diagram with like drawings of actual spiders because I've got sidetracked. And it's like, oh, now we're playing. Okay, cool. I totally have notes here. I swear I've prepped all of this.
Right. Ruffle. Yeah.
Oh, I wrote that down. I'm not turning to last week's session and looking at names.
My notes are horrible, and I remember I actually the whole thing that spiraled into ending up with Matt Mercer on the show was that I had answered a question directed towards him, which is, what do I write in my DM notes? I'm a new DM and I don't know what to write down in my notes. And so I don't usually write notes, but I had just been starting a new campaign, so I had to write down a whole bunch of stuff just to get it straight in my head. And so I sent her that. I just sent her a picture of what my notes look like. It's very, very simple stuff. You know, this is what this is the rumors around town. This is what some people might know. You know, this is what the clue they need to find. That's it. You know, and everything else is improv. And I also sent, and I don't know, you guys may have seen it if you've seen my Twitter. You may not have. I sent my spider diagram, which is, I was writing the plot for a different campaign, and when I say writing the plot, I mean writing down a word that describes like a vignette scene, and just like interconnecting these things in like a spider web of, you know, this connects to here, and a clue from here needs to lead to here. And I've shared it in chat before. It's horrible, it makes no sense, and no one but me understands it.
If you've been doing it for a long time, it's like, oh, okay, I know when I write this, it means the orc has 65 hit points and I'm moving on. Because time is so limited, especially if you are an adult and you have other commitments like a real job and a social life and volunteer or other hobbies or whatever it is, a romantic relationship, right? All of those things can put demands on your time, and you want to spend time on all of those things. So yeah, I mean, I think shorthand is a big deal, and I also think it's why adventure writing, like if you sit down and you actually want to write a published adventure, is so much different than doing prep for your own game, because that's for somebody else to read and understand the story. This is just for you to read and understand the story. So and that's great. Like it's awesome that everybody has their own shorthand. And for some people feel more comfortable with a lot of prep done and everything mapped out. I have a buddy, Greg, who is an amazing GM, and he comes with a binder of stuff, because if we go over here, he wants to have a dungeon ready, and if we go over here, he wants to have the personality of the king ready. And it probably wouldn't surprise you to find out he's newer. He's an amazing GM. He's played games his whole life, but he's newer at actually GMing. Whereas a lot of older GMs I know, they've got more pictures of actual spiders than actual spider diagrams in their notes. I'm the same way. So
I don't know about you guys. I have a habit of writing notes if I do at all, but that I will sometimes write notes and then never read them. Like my plan for the session. Like I will write down my plan for the session and I will not look at it once during the game, because I don't know, like maybe just the act of writing it is enough for me to be like, yeah, okay, it's good enough. Like I get what I want to do. I know what I want to have happen, and I don't really need. But that's the thing, is you're right about being a newer DM. Is back when I started, like I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable saying like, okay, this time in this session I want to have we're gonna start with a fight, and then we're gonna do a big exposition when the players or a big kind of dramatic scene when the players find the relic at the bottom of the temple, and then they're gonna have a nice kind of sort of relaxing meeting at the tavern with their friend over there. Like, if I know that these are the things that I want to have, the notes that I want to hit during the session, like, I don't really need to plan anything for those, because, well, I know what the boss is gonna say when they get there. Like, I may not know exactly what he's gonna say, but I know he's gonna say something, and it's gonna be menacing and have gravitas, and that's really all I need to know. And then I know they're gonna have a nice relaxing session at the bar, which is mostly them talking to each other. So it's like, I could write notes, I could write NPC names and clues and this and that, but it's like, I think I'm comfortable enough with the way I do things now that I very rarely need to actually reference those during the game. In fact, one of the things I think is a detriment that I need to learn how to do is I need to take more notes about what actually happens in the session, because every DM says, write down everything that happens, and I'm so in the moment that it's like, player takes a bite of vampire heart. Oh, I should probably write this down, but I didn't, because I just hope I remember it for next week.
You couldn't be more correct, and I think that's where the emphasis needs to sit, is it's about their story. So you've got to keep track of their story so you can bring it back next week and the week after, or how often you play. And things that they place huge emphasis on, and by they I mean the players. You're kind of going, yeah, you're doing that, I'm busy getting this ready, I'm busy thinking about that. But that's what's important,
exactly.
Is keeping track, of what they do. And one of the things that I'm always very appreciative of, looking back at making notes and things, we have one player who plays in my offline game, who I can rely on to create my super plots for me, because I'll give him, let's say, A, B, and C as clues or whatever, and he'll sit down with the party and he'll say, all right, guys, so we know that A is linked to F, which is definitely linked to Z because it has to be because of, we saw a spider 3 weeks ago. And I'm sitting there going, that is crazy, but it's better than what I had planned. So yeah, that's totally the link. That's absolutely what's happening. But then you need to write it down because you've got to remember this stuff in 3 weeks' time when the spiders are suddenly important again.
You should, by the way, speaking of bullshitting and allowing players to do things for you, one of my players in my game did actually, they were at the bottom of a vampire temple and they found a heart in a dish. Now this cult was called the Feasters of the Heart, and I just described the heart in the dish, but I didn't have any plans for it, because the only thing that I really had planned in my head was, it could be really cool if their ritual for, like, people joining the vampire cult was that they had this vampire heart and you would bite into it, symbolically feasting, and you would become a vampire. That sounds really cool. I didn't write stats or anything for that. And then, middle of the fight with the vampire priest, the barbarian rushes up, grabs the heart, takes a big old bite out of it. So I just described a whole bunch of nasty stuff that happened, whatever, in the moment, and I decided that I would give him a vampire, like a template for a minor kind of vampire. We're playing Pathfinder, so it's like a template you apply to the character, that I had found in some splat book. That it was cool, it was interesting and thematic, but it wasn't like overpowered or anything. It it didn't give him like natural attacks and invisibility or anything. It's just a little bit of a shift. He gains weakness to light and water and stuff like, and certain other things, but he gains other things. And so whatever, that happened and it's going on, and he had left the heart at home at their house for a while, or maybe he was I think he was carrying it with him. He was carrying it with them. Yeah, I know that sounds weird, but he was carrying it with him, and they had just come back from this dungeon where they had fled because of a big nasty monster at the bottom, and he was exhausted because as a barbarian he had spent all his rounds of rage and he had taken some massive damage. And he was beaten up, he was on the edge, and he decided to take a bite out of this to see if to take a bite out of his heart, see if it would revive him. And so the heart was all kind of drying up and stuff. And so he's like, I took a bunch of blood, because I'm a vampire, from this boss that we killed. Maybe I can submerge the heart in the blood. And literally I'm just spinning this story about how the blood that he's putting in the heart is causing it to like necrotize and turn black. And he's like, I gotta eat it. I gotta eat the whole thing before it rots. And he did. And I'm just talking about like, you're racked with pain and stuff. But I'm literally, the whole time, I'm just thinking like, I have no idea. I didn't plan for I don't know what's going on with this heart. I have no idea what I'm gonna do with this. This should be important, but I'm just making it up. Like, but yeah, no. And then it's one of those things where what you were talking about is like the player does something and you just kind of bullshit for like 5 minutes, and they think it's incredibly profound, and then afterwards you kind of race backwards. You're like, okay, how can I tie this into the story?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's him, right, telling you, like, this is important, and you picked up on that rather than being like, okay, you eat the gross heart and moving on. You're picking up on this should be a big moment, right? And that is what a great GM does, and that's amazing that you continued with that. And that sounds like that's a killer story that you can tell anywhere, and any gamer is going to be like, I wish that happened at my table. And it's because you as the GM picked up on it. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree absolutely. I think that is one of the risks if you over prepare. If you literally have this heart is used for this ritual and that's it. If you don't have that ability to roll with it and take it, and as you rightly say, pick up that the player has said, this is important to me. I want to take this further. I want to explore this. If you kind of go sitting on, sorry, my note says that it's a heart and it just doesn't do anything. You're missing out a great opportunity, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the TV writing way, right? Like if you're writing a television show or a movie and along the way something doesn't come in your outline or something's not in your season plan, the executive producers don't say, sorry, it's not in the outline. They say, that's a great idea. throw this out or add this or change that, and that's how you get great television and great stuff. Breaking Bad, they didn't have that all planned out. That was as it came. They figured it out. Actors were coming and going and getting other jobs, and they made it all work. And I feel like it's the same thing with your D&D game. Like, be flexible, be open. Just because you have a grand idea for what the finale should be and who the big bad should be flexible with that and really collaborate with your players, because you'll end up with a better story for it too. And less prep time.
And also, I don't know how you guys feel about this. This has always been a weird thing for me, but I do actually want to get an idea, because I don't know, some DMs seem really, really stoked on it, and others seem like, no, this would really get in the way of telling my story. I play with Encounter Roleplay a lot. They're another streaming channel, and I was DMing a game called Reign of Winter for them for a little while. We finished season 1. It was a lot of fun. But one of the things that happened was they do a thing called like wild magic surges. People in chat donate a little bit of money, and you roll on a huge wild magic table, and almost anything random can happen. Literally, just anything you can imagine. And one of the things that had happened was one of the players, via a wild magic surge, became immune to falling damage. He could not take falling damage, which at the time was like, oh, that's funny, but it's never going to matter. And then so they're at the top of this tower, and this ice tower that they had chased this witch up to, and she wasn't there, but they were fighting her like lieutenant, and he is getting beat up, and he realizes, oh shit, I'm going down, I gotta go, and so he casts fly on himself, and he goes out the window. And in the heat of the moment, the fighter grabs the monk and is like, I throw him out the window after the guy, and they rolled a nat 20 on the throw, but the monk, as he's plummeting to the ground, does not have any way of controlling his flight. So instead of actually catching the dude in midair, he basically lands square in the center of this courtyard on this giant ice dragon statue that the wizard was in the process of animating into an enemy, and he basically crushed the statue with his falling damage because he couldn't take falling damage. But but the thing is, he totally forgot about that. Like, he expected to die, because I'm like, roll, what are we, 80 feet up, roll 8d6, and he's like, oh shit, 35. And that all was damage to the dragon. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is because I want to be like, how do you guys feel about possibly adding like those kind of random elements into your storytelling? Like, have you ever experimented with anything like that, or do you find that you're more comfortable when you as the DM have that complete like there's no surprise narrative kind of elements kind of popping up at you?
Well, from my perspective, I want to say I'm slightly against it personally, simply because I've used wild magic before, and the guys have got the table, and you're trying to set up a tense moment or a tense combat where things are coming down to the line, and the next minute the mage does something and they have a beard of pink feathers, or it's funny, but it kind of breaks the whole scene, whereas if I can control what the outcome is, I can use it to make it some innocuous effect, but one that doesn't kind of break the flow. So for me, that's when people are rolling on tables to have narrative outcomes, I kind of get nervous, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of the Fantasy Flight role-playing systems which have come out for Star Wars, because there's a lot of dice determining story outcome and favorable conditions or unfavorable conditions and that kind of thing. So that's my opinion on it. I'm not a fan of dice telling me what to do in terms of my story.
Oh wow! I think I am probably the opposite. I think every game I DM, there's a wand of wonder and a deck of many things, and Sorcerer Wild Magic, like when that came out for 5e, because they brought sort of the Wild Magic back to its roots with the random table in 5th edition. I was like, oh, this is the best class. And then I went on the forums and everyone's like, this is a terrible class. You could cast Fireball centered on yourself at first level and kill your entire party. That's not a good class. That's a terrible class. So I play with a lot of humor in my games. I play with a group of gentlemen who were pretty much all in my college improv troupe. So that probably has a lot to do with it. And there have been times where it's the tense battle against Strahd, right? And then all of a sudden your skin turns blue. That really does break the flow of the game. I definitely can't argue with that, especially if you're trying to tell a more dramatic or a more tense story. But I do like the fun moments that come out of there. So I am torn. I will say that my players, they were in a situation where they had to give up a magic item, and without hesitation, they were like, "Give them the Wand of Wonder, give that dragon the Wand of Wonder, and let's move on." So and that's me thinking like, oh, okay, maybe I'm doing this too much, right? Like this is another cue my players are giving to me that like, yeah, we're kind of tired of the random tables, and we want to have a little bit more agency over what we're telling in our story. So, but I do love it when they surprise me. When your players surprise you, that used to be frustrating as all get out, because I would have done so much prep, but now it's like, yeah, you guys want to go over there to the unmapped area? Let's do it. You guys want to go to this plane that I have read one paragraph about my entire life? Let's do it. Let's figure out what hell is like. I
don't mean to cut you off short, but thank you so much to Michael Ohl for pledging £5 on Patreon. Thank you, my man, for helping support the show. You have your name, of course, in the scroll bar now. You are awesome, and thank you for embracing the madness. Michael is hopefully not the last, but you guys, if you are enjoying the show, please consider pledging $1 or $5, or however much you can spare on Patreon. Support making content on this channel. We bring you awesome D&D content like this every week, and thank you once again, my friend. You are great. So yeah, I agree with you. By the way, I just want to say with the random things, I had never used them until I started playing with Encounter, and it was, I know they've written articles. I know Mitch is hanging out with us in chat. He may be able to speak to this a little bit more, because I remember he wrote an article specifically about how viewer decisions and viewer interaction doesn't necessarily make a game worse, but in a lot of cases can make it better. And I do agree with him in some way. Like I'm horrible at I always wanted to do viewer interaction stuff. The reason that I never really did it on the games on this channel is because it was a little bit of a different feel. Like on that channel, you were sort of playing D&D like 6 days a week, or 5 or 6 days a week. So it's like every player is playing enough D&D per week that you're almost, that none of those are ever your real campaign. They're all a campaign that you're in. But on my channel, and I'm not saying this is better, I'm just saying it's different. On my channel, I run one campaign, and for the players, that is their D&D game. Like, This is their campaign. I would love to open it up, and I'm not averse to having people donate money. I absolutely would love it, but, I don't necessarily know if allowing that would take away from the player's experience. Like, if they would feel like, okay, maybe this is a little less my campaign and this is more everyone's campaign, because they're donating money to shape it as they want, as well as I'm hopefully shaping it the way I want. Fix-It Geek says, viewer interaction scares me. Too many nightmares of the Deck of Many Things. I've actually used the Deck of Many Things once. That was a viewer decision in Reign of Winter, and it was actually surprisingly decent. One of the players, Will, he was praying that he didn't roll a 22, The 22 is the death card. Or in an older version, it's the card you lose your soul. Your soul gets trapped somewhere. He was praying for not a 22. He rolled a 22. So basically, he spent the rest of the campaign not having a soul. His soul was actually trapped somewhere in the possession of the Witch Queen that they were fighting against, and she ended up putting it in a doll, like in a guardian doll.
Wow.
But yeah, that's Deck of Many Things came up once in that campaign, and it was not as destructive as you would expect it to be.
Sure.
Perhaps if I can ask you a question, throw it out to you guys then, in regards to magical items. It's something that pops up. People ask me, how do you handle magical items? Personally, I have possibly never used any of the fixed set magical items. Maybe a bag of holding here, or a sword +1 or +2. But if it's got to be a magical item with a personality, or not with a personality, it's got to be a magical item that stands out as a magical item rather than sort of just a +1 or whatever. Usually those I'm crafting myself. For players who are more rules conscious, it frustrates them because they don't have the ability to kind of go and look at stuff, figure out its value and that kind of thing, because it doesn't exist anywhere except in my head. What do you guys do in terms of magical items? Do you kind of stick to the rule books, or do you venture forth?
I like to. Well, okay, so I'm generally a Pathfinder DM. I have started DMing 5th edition, but Pathfinder is the thing I'm most comfortable in. And there is such a wealth of magic items to search through that I will use a lot of them. I run a lot of modules, and modules tend to have suggestions for items to give out, and sometimes I will crib those in a in a way to use them. My general thing about magic items is players will loot in my campaigns will always be it'll always make sense for where and how it comes up. So like if the players are fighting a human, like a human and aristocratic enemy or something like that, he's not going to be carrying like a +1 flaming great axe, because it would make no sense for him. Even if there's a barbarian in the party who really wants that, like he might be carrying a rapier of some sort, or even if there's no one in the party that can use that item, or he might be using an exotic item that maybe there's no one in the party that has any use for it. It doesn't really matter, because I'm more interested in the verisimilitude that it creates in the campaign world when the players can look at an enemy and say, okay, yeah, I can probably guess what this guy's gonna have on him, and if he doesn't have anything I need on him, I may either just toss it in the bag, or I may just not even loot him, because whatever. But for magic items, yeah, I like when I'm crafting an enemy, I will craft an enemy with whatever whatever items and armor I think makes sense for that enemy to have. If it's like they just fought a human aristocrat, it was a dude who was masquerading as like a plague a doctor overseer, like he overseed the plague doctors in the city. He had a +1 human bane rapier. He had some, he had your basic cloak of protection, amulet of armor, things like that. And he had a flask that was labeled the elixir of true healing, which it was actually a flask of curses. He had it specifically to trick people. So that if they ever took it off of him, they would get fucked up. And the players did just that. They had just fought him, and they were like, "Oh, the barbarian's really low on health. Here's a flask of healing," and they handed it to him, and he cursed the whole party. But but that's the thing is, the way I do that is I will assign the magic items to the loot horde or the enemy as I feel they make sense, and it's only if the players go out of their way to search out a specific item. Like, if they're really, really interested in finding a very, very specific item, I might actually make it kind of difficult for them to find it, only because I think that the journey, the actual effort that goes into tracking down the merchant and getting him to import it for you, and, dealing with maybe having to fetch some special material or something like all the stuff that you can turn into a story, or because my philosophy is, there's anything that you can turn into gameplay, do it. Whether that means getting an item that the players really want rather than just going to the store and buying it, or or anything like that, like crafting something, changing a class, like anything you can turn into gameplay, you might as well, because it can always be an interesting part of the story. And that's generally how I do things. Like, magic items are just part of the story. We'll add them as they make sense. They'll be used to tell the story, and sometimes I'll throw in a custom crafted one to that, if I really feel like, okay, we need something special here.
Yeah, I do. I'd say I do a mix. So having a blog means that there's you give yourself a lot of homework, right? You're like, okay, every week I will update this thing, and I've made a lot of magic items on my blog for 5th edition D&D. So and the reason I did that is because 5th edition D&D is great. I played a lot of 3rd and a lot of 4th, and those systems, magic items are kind of built into the math. So as you level up, your players need stuff. And so it was great when 5th came out and they were like, listen, you don't need to give anybody any magic items, more or less. And so give as many or as few as you want. Made magic items special again, right? It was like, oh, you found a +1 sword. That was a big deal now. But the 5th edition, in the monster manual, the magic items in the DMG, all of your kind of class options, they were going back to the roots. So there's no magic item in there that is a new, we've never seen it before magic item. And I didn't want my players to, get a flame tongue and know exactly what it did or that kind of thing, especially after getting so many of them and playing those previous editions. So I have them, but I have, because of the blog, I have written them down what exactly they do. But I sometimes keep certain effects secret from the characters or certain, it's great when an item has a personality, right? And it's great to keep sort of, maybe the item has a secret agenda and it thinks that you're bloodthirsty and gullible and it can make you kill more things than maybe you thought you were going to, or that kind of thing. And I think, Mike Merles the other day tweeted out something like, the only magic items I give my players are ones they should be afraid to use. And that's certainly not my style, but I'm thinking about co-opting it because that sounds amazing. And I think the exchange is you get great power with these very scary items. So I don't know. Do you, Guy? Do you like curse people? Like when they get an item, is there a curse? Are there drawbacks attached to them sometimes?
Yeah. So in terms of magical items and what I use them for is often it's to do more with the character's story and trying to help them perhaps shine a little bit more in the actual party itself. So one of the examples that I've used recently is our rogue was playing a very quiet character, very withdrawn, kind of nobody notices him type of thing. And that's very against his type, so he's role-playing it very well. But I wanted to give him something a little bit special to make him have a moment to shine type of thing, because he was very lackluster on all scales, because that was kind of what he was going for. So I gave him a fish dagger. So it's a dagger that looks like a fish. But the moment it comes anywhere near water, he has to make a dexterity or an acrobatics check because the thing jumps and tries to get into the water, right? But when you stab somebody with it, it blows up like a pufferfish and causes them to explode. So there's pros and cons to it. But it just gave him a little bit more flash, a little bit something to own that was unique about his character. And as a result, he uses it very carefully. So yeah, that's that's not all that it can do. It will grow and it will evolve and it will kind of change they stepped into the plane of life and death, and suddenly it turned into the spirit of a giant whale type of thing. So it kind of keeps them guessing as well, right? Because I'm a big fan of keeping my players on their toes. So I especially with monsters and things as well. I'll never use what's written in the book. I'll use the book and go, oh, okay, that's what they're supposed to do. Right, these are totally different. They have different hit points, they have different armor class, they have different, everything. So that there isn't, oh, it's a group of orcs. Well, we're level 20. We should be able to just walk through them without any kind of problem.
Right. Yeah.
But again, that can frustrate people. And I was just listening to you with regards to your blog, where you kind of have to research stuff and you have to write down stuff that's actually true. The thing about my channel, and I've been criticized for it, is people say, but you don't talk about rules, and the rules you do talk about are wrong. Have you actually read any of the Dungeon Master guides and stuff? Like, no, that would be silly. That sounds like hard work, right? So as long as everyone's having fun, that to me is the important thing. As long as the story kind of goes through. But it's horses for courses. So people who are very rules heavy and like to know exactly what's going on, they don't often have fun in my game. They get frustrated because of that.
Yeah, but it sounds like you observed the rule of cool, which is a great rule to observe. So yeah. I don't know. What about you, Brian? Are you into cursed items?
Yes.
I mean, clearly that elixir, right, was a big time cursed item.
Yeah. Ironically, I didn't actually write that. That was actually written onto the NPC. I just had a ton of fun putting it into practice. Cursed items are all right. The thing about cursed items to me that are a little bit weird is I'm not a huge fan of the stereotypical kind of cursed ring. It's like, oh, it looks like a ring of protection, and then you put it on and it's a ring of -2 AC, and also you can't get it off your finger. Like, the players go, ah, and then they find a way to like remove curse to something in a little while, and they just throw it out, and it's whatever. They learn to be a little bit more cautious when they're examining items and stuff like that. But what I really like is items that fly under the player's radar a little bit, in a way that maybe they're not necessarily a traditional curse, but they screw with the player on a narrative level that maybe the player, unless they're scrutinizing it, unless they're paying attention, isn't actually aware of. An example of this being in Curse of the Crimson Throne. It has one of the coolest Chekhov's gun kind of moments early on in the campaign that pays off later, and that is that real early on in the campaign, the players fight. They go up against this gang because the city has rioted. It's in kind of it's in decline as this major metropolis they lost their king. The whole city went into riot mode because they hate the queen, and among that confusion and that sort of post-riot tension in the air, there's a small gang of people that are going around and they're doing criminal activity, and they're operating out of this butchery where their cover is that they're giving free meat out to the public just to make it look like whatever. That's all irrelevant. What is relevant is the fact that when the players fight their way through this gang and they go to the guy at the end of it, they find stuck in his desk, like just point down in the desk, a silver dagger. And so, okay, they're going to loot the room, they're going to pick the silver dagger, they're going to toss it in their pack. What they don't know is that the silver dagger is not a silver dagger. What it actually is, I don't know how much you know about Rakshasas, but Rakshasas have a lot of things that are associated with them, and one of their sort of minion creatures is called a Raktavarna, which is a little silver snake that can polymorph itself into any object made of silver. And so what it does is it basically acts as, in the spy movies when like they slap a listening device on the guy and it's like now you know where he is and what he's saying and what he's seeing. That's basically what it is. As long as this snake is with the players, the Rakshasa somewhere in the city knows who they are. It knows what they're doing. It knows what's going on, and as long as they never sell it or really come in and scrutinize the item. If they scrutinize it, technically they'll detect magic, but they won't be able to determine what kind of magic, and that sets off player red flags in a second. So they'll fucking throw that thing out. The interesting thing, though, is a Raktavarna is not just a snake. It is a snake that is both intelligent and comes with sort of magical powers. It has the at-will ability Suggestion, and some other minor charm effects. So basically, if it leaves the possession of the person that it is intended for, it can repolymorph itself, find someone, and somehow charm their way into that person, giving the item back to the players in a different form.
Wow.
So they can, if you're tricky and if you're crafty as a DM, you can make sure they always have this item on them, and it's one of those real subtle clues which, if they really pay attention, it gives away a big detail later on in the campaign. But if they're not paying attention, those like, oh, a silver dagger, this may come in handy. Pocket it. It goes at the bottom of the pack. Forget it's there. But those are the kind of items that I really like. Items that have an operation to them. Like, they work in a way that is subtle but interesting and kind of makes you as a DM sort of think in a crafty way. How do I keep this item with the players? How do I get them to not throw this in the garbage? And if they do throw it in the garbage, how do I get it back to them without raising suspicion? Because that's a mental exercise, I'm telling you now. That is it. Toss that item into just as a test, toss an item like that into your campaign and let the players throw it out. See if you can sneak that item back to them without them noticing. It is not easy, but it's fun.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. So
some music needs to come down a little.
Some master GMing for sure to be done that way. That's awesome. I like that. That's a fun story that I will steal.
Go do it. You can hit up the D20 PFSRD and just search Raktavarna, and it will give you all the information on that.
Oh, nice.
Do you ever use your magical items, specifically items with personality, or say very loyal NPCs to perhaps bring in a subtle DM perspective to the party's consciousness? So, by way of example, I needed my players, particularly in the game that we broadcast on YouTube, I needed them to start thinking in certain directions, which they may not necessarily have gone in. I also wanted to add in a little bit of inter-party tension because it wasn't really there. This was more because it's being broadcast. My background in television says I've got to make sure that the story remains interesting, over and above kind of what's expected. So what I did was I had one of the characters get a extra spirit added into their consciousness. So the spirit can't do anything, but it can talk to her and her alone. She's the only one who can hear it. Mm-hmm. And so it just kind of pops up every now and again, and not in a very obvious way, but it presents alternatives. So when they form an alliance with a bunch of drow, this little spirit, which is it's actually a merfolk prince, keeps urging her to kill them because they're not trustworthy, which is kind of contrary to what they're busy trying to prove. These drow are kind of helping them and working with them. But whether it's a spirit like that or a talking animal companion, you guys ever build in some kind of mouthpiece of God, if you like?
Yes, but what? Yes and no. Not like I don't think I've ever created an NPC specifically to deliver exposition, but I think inevitably, unless your campaign is a very, very different type than most that normally run, inevitably the players will gravitate towards one specific NPC who will kind of be the one they go to after they finish every quest, or the one they kind of go to ask, like, what's going on in the city, or what's the feeling in the world. Basically, they will create sort of a liaison, an NPC that they can confide in, that they trust, and that, in their mind at least, has the local knowledge that the DM has that maybe they don't necessarily know. Almost every campaign will end up with an NPC like this in the eyes of the players. I don't think I ever really create NPCs specifically to do that, but I will very often use NPCs to deliver direction or clues that the players may not necessarily have picked up on, or may have, like, if for example they're saying, okay, so we've scoured the town for information. We found a lead that goes here, we found a lead that goes here, and we found the lead that goes here. And we could go here and do this now, or we could go this way and do this now, or we could go this way and do this now, but we don't really know what we want to do. And if in your mind you're like, oh, okay, well, I kind of don't want them to go do this one right now, because I think it makes a little bit more sense for, like, let's say they hear about a sunken boat. Well, maybe it makes more sense for them to go to that sunken boat after they realize something else is going on. Then that way, that's a good time for you to have an NPC that steps in and be like, hey guys, I know you're probably, I know whatever, but we got a situation over this way, can you come help us with it? And the players will, they're like, oh yeah, quest to do? Yeah, okay. And that'll snap their focus in the direction that you want to take them in, and then once they're done, either they will remember, or you can use an NPC to remind them, oh right, we had another thing over there that we could go do. And they'll feel like they're the ones making the choice to do it. You just kind of have an NPC pop up and say, like, hey guys, you want to go this way? You can do it. Or if your players are the ones that take initiative on their own and you just don't necessarily care what order things happen in, you don't need to do that. Sometimes I like to do it sometimes because it helps me kind of just keep the narrative more tight and focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely done. I've done the voice of God. In fact, I did it so much that then when we switched campaigns, I had I had a lot of prophetic dreams and things like that. And then I had an evil god was guiding them in the next campaign, and it took them a couple of dreams to figure out, like, oh wait a second, hold on, what's going on here? So that was kind of fun to even pull the rug out from them there. And I've also had unreliable narrators. I had them find a living skull that could talk, and the living skull was kind of telling them, giving them information and talking to them about the past. But the living skull was the skull of a person who was, they were like a bigot. They were a hate monger, yeah. and they hated elves, or they hated dwarves. And so they had this very skewed perspective on history, the same way, somebody who maybe somebody's grandpa would have a different perspective of the Civil War than a guy like me from the Northeast would in America. Somebody's grandpa from Atlanta might have a very different idea, and so it was kind of like, okay, we're seeing it through this perspective, kind of like you said with your merfolk, like your merfolk telling them not to trust the drow. Is that just because he hates drow, or is it because drow are more or less inherently evil and this is a bad idea no matter who you are? I love that. I think that's great. And, like, is it going to come out that maybe in his past he's had some bad dealing with drow, or maybe he just is much smarter than the characters and knows this is going to go south sometime and you should probably murder them before they murder you.
Unreliable narrators are a great way. Like, if I'm ever going to use them, my suggestion is always, like, have all the information. First of all, it's a great narrative tool, especially when you can deliver all of that information, like, straight, like with like it's the only perspective that the players are getting, and then they kind of they develop their notions, and then they get exposed to, like, the truth of things or the other side of the matter, and then they really kind of don't know which way to go. It's a really classic narrative technique, but it's really it's an interesting way to create confusion and also discussion among your players, because you never know. Maybe they might have people in the party that sympathize on either side of the of an issue or something like that. And also, as Pencil Stroke says in chat, stealing from players is a good way to lead them in a certain direction, or not just stealing, kidnap one of their friends, preferably in front of them.
That's great.
Yeah, I did that. I did that once. I kidnapped one of the player's friends, and that was a role-playing moment. The role-playing, he's a barbarian, so the role-playing came in the form of him, like, they were working for this crime boss, and they had captured his friend, and his friend hadn't talked yet, hadn't given them up. But, like, the barbarian was basically, like, chewing his lip, trying in the moment to not, like, beat the shit out of all the people in this room and blow their cover.
Yeah. I mean, and I could not agree more. I love putting an unreliable narrator into stuff. It's the best. I think the voice of God is a great trick, especially when you want your players to be thinking, even if you just want to shake things up and you want them to think a little differently about what they're doing, bringing that kind of outside perspective, whether it is an actual God or some NPC, I think is great.
Let me add on one real quick. My last thought on this is not only just an unreliable narrator, bring in an NPC who like has a problem with the player's actions. Like, have an NPC tell the players that they're doing the wrong thing. Like it's such a powerful thing to make your players feel, even for just a second, that maybe they're not in the right.
Yeah, which it sounds like that's what you're doing, right, Guy?
Right. No, absolutely. It's that morality that is not necessarily always present in a party. That brings up that ugly bugbear of alignment, where you kind of go, well, everyone's got alignments, but most parties are kind of chaotic, neutral. They'll steal from anything. They'll kill anything that kind of threatens them and kind of move forward. On that point, one of the mechanics that I have, and it has to be used carefully because it can be overused, is because deities provide a lot of divine power, it means they're quite active in the world that they are lording over. So I have a mechanic where players characters can pray to their particular deity, and then they roll a percentile die. And if they roll 1%, they have a vision from their deity. Now, the mechanism to prevent them from just kind of doing that in every situation is that if they somehow roll a 1% and they come face to face with their god, and it's like, oh, we were just asking for faster service at the tolling station or whatever the case might be. If it's something that is not worthy of their god's attention, they will be punished for it accordingly. So it's only when they're in desperate, dire times of need.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable is, even though it's 1%, the amount of times that it comes up when they desperately need something is scary. And then that really is the voice of God. That's the closest you can get to, hey, this is a direct line to the DM, and this is what should be happening.
And thank you so much, Just Call Me Alec, for hitting that follow button, my friend. Welcome to the madness, and if you are all enjoying the discussion and enjoying the show, you should follow along and also hit that follow button. You get a free 2,000 experience and a level up when you do, and you can use that experience to gamble in Dice Thulu's dungeon. But we're coming up on the kind of the halfway point here, and I figure we've done a kind of a lot of back and forth, but we should definitely take some time to turn this over to questions from people in chat, because we've had a bunch of people that are hanging out with us, and I have a ton of questions that people have sent me both on Twitter and Reddit and other places, some that are saved from other things. So I definitely want to get through them. So what do you guys say? What do we dive into to some questions here? Before we do, For those of you who may have just joined us, for those of you who are hanging out with us for the first time, you're watching the Fuzzy Dice Show here on the Exploding Dice channel. I've got Guy Sclanders over here and James Introcaso on the other side, and I can't point right. And we're having an awesome discussion about DM stuff, tips, tricks, stories, all kinds of things, and you guys are hanging out and hopefully enjoying us. So I'm gonna drop it into chat, !Fuzzy, because Dice Thulu will remind you that this is your weekly Dungeon Master Hangout. So go ahead and toss any questions or topics you guys want us to discuss, and we will gladly delve into them for you. Anything that you want to talk about, questions, tips you're looking for, I don't know, maybe what color socks we're wearing right now. We could go into that a little bit. I'm going to look through my document and see if we have a good question to start on, but I know I had one on Twitter before, and I will search for that. Where is it on Twitter? I've got so much stuff here. Ah, right, okay, nope. That's not it. That's the guy that sent it to me, but that's not his question. It's back here. Let me just go to, okay, fine. I'll go to my mentions. Twitter's being lazy. I can't find it. Okay, Marvin, Nasianenso, I don't even know how, Marvin N, on Twitter, at Marv Hells Yeah, says, have you created an NPC that you've become really attached to, and why?
Yeah, I mean, definitely multiple NPCs that I have loved playing and really loved getting attached to. For me, one of the things, I maybe have about 6 voices that I do over and over again. And so when I can find an NPC with a new voice, I usually get really attached to that person because I know I can do it and I know it sounds good and I feel comfortable talking in their voice. And so it always pains me when somebody like that dies because then I'll have to come up with something new. But for me, I think one of the NPCs I sort of became most attached to was the skull that my characters were carrying around, because it did turn out, for as much of a racist and a bigot as he was, which I am not, it did turn out like they managed to, they went on a quest to sort of civilize this skull and teach him about the world. And when they would meet, you know, when an elf or a dwarf would help them out, they'd be like, see, like, non-humans can be good people too, and and they eventually succeeded in that. So I feel like for me, when an NPC has a real arc and they're traveling with the characters, and when they're funny and fun to play, and the characters like, hey, we like this guy and we want to like him better, so how can we do that? And again, that was me listening to their story rather than just pushing back and making him a stubborn, never going to change kind of guy. That was really fun, and that was a thing that was way more meaningful than I ever intended it to be. And so for me, the skull Moses Gomer will go down as one of my most attached NPCs. Thank goodness he was a changed skull. That's yeah.
That's absolutely awesome. That's really awesome. Can you do the voice for us?
Yes, yeah, and again, now people are gonna get on me because, of course, he was like Southern American, but he would come up to you and he'd say, "All right, now, what are we gonna do? Let's go on here." So that kind of thing was Moses Gomer.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. He definitely wants to make America great again. So. But he's changed. So he's seen the light, which is good. Yeah. So that would be my NPC that I was attached.
I don't so much have a singular NPC that sticks out because my party usually kills them before they live too long. But, I have an order which is called the Giad Order, and they transcend whether I'm doing Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons or a sci-fi game or a post-apocalyptic game. This order exists everywhere in all my universes, and it's basically like a secret organization that runs around and tries to run the world how they think it should be run. And of course they pop in every now and again, and sometimes they use the characters in the story to do good things, and sometimes they manipulate them to do bad things. But usually there's a fellow in there who pops up, and he's got a very particular accent, because I like to do accents as well. I'm not very good at them, but I like to use them because it kind of creates a character almost instantly in the minds of people, and they can associate. So a lot of people who played with me for many years, the moment they hear this particular accent, they go, oh, it's this order and they found us, and now we're going to go all over the place and just, we're stuck, right? So it's like a transcendent NPC, if you like. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think So there, I've run quite a few times. I've run the beginning of Rise of the Rune Lords, which is a Pathfinder adventure path, and I've run a lot of things in the town of Sandpoint. Sandpoint is if you haven't interacted with it, it's sort of like the starting town in the entire Pathfinder setting. Like, it's your generic little village that all the adventurers come from, and it's one of those things where it's small enough that you can basically get introduced to all of the NPCs around town. There's a small enough amount of shops and stuff that you can meet pretty much everyone, and it's all written out, so everyone in this town has a distinct personality. But there's this one character who was never really given a personality other than that he was a sage. He's like the wise sage in town, but he's also like an archaeologist type. His name is Broder Quink. And I don't know how I decided on it. I don't know how I came to the conclusion of it. But once my players came and they knocked on his door because they wanted to ask him a question about something, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. All I know is I wanted a chance to do a really weird and kind of nutty wizard voice, because I felt like the campaign needed a note more levity. And so I had him open the door, and he was like, yes, hello. And then he says, who are you? And he was like, oh, great, yes, I have your delivery. And he shoves a handful of books into the hand of the player that was knocking on the door and says, there you go, please do not come by again, and slams the door in his face. And the player's just sitting there like, what? And so they loved the character so much that I made it so every time they visited his house, something different was happening. Like, one time he had filled his entire entry foyer with plants. Like, it was like a jungle in there, and he brought them into the study, and he kind of sat them down at like school desks. They were asking about this artifact that they had uncovered in a dungeon, and he was like, yes, I'll explain all of it. And then he goes over to a blackboard and starts explaining the process of hydroponic plant growing that he's just invented. And like, basically it became a thing where the players loved it so much because every time they went to this character, they had no idea what was gonna happen. They could not predict it. And I just love doing the voice, I love doing the character. It's such a break from the norm and sort of the gravitas and the thing of all the rest of the campaign, that I've sort of grown attached to him. I try and use that character under a different name anywhere I go. It's just such a fun character to play, and even if it's not like that wacky and ridiculous, there's always got to be like some kind of kooky wizard, maybe running the wizard shop in town, or maybe he's a quest NPC or something. I got really attached to that particular NPC.
Yeah.
Pencil Stroke says, question, would each of you present two pen and paper RPGs that are not D&D and maybe not so popular?
Oh, sure.
Do you guys interact with a lot of other RPGs?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tons.
One that we've just done, which was quite a remarkable event for us anyway, is there's a pen and paper role playing system called the Lone Wolf RPG.
Yes,
which
it's up
is
for some Ennies, right?
It's got a couple nominations for Ennies this year, as a matter of fact. You're absolutely right. And what was truly remarkable for us anyway, especially down here in South Africa, was that we got the rule system. It came through to our local hobby shop. We picked it up, got around the table, played through it. It's a very simple system. You use 1d10, and that's it. There's no other dice involved. Very cool setting that Joe Dever set up. And played through it, did a YouTube video for our channel, and took a chance and just sent the link through to the author himself. And he watched it and came back, and he gave us feedback on how we played the system, and sent us the advanced rules that'll be coming out in August, I think, for an expansion to the whole thing. So he got really involved, which for us was fantastic. But the point of the matter is, it's a great system. It's so simple that it's just about story, and it just flows. And if you're looking for complicated stuff where you're going to have physics and mathematics to work out truly accurate simulations and stuff, it's not for you. I mean, it's literally a D10 and you're adding +1 or +2 to the result type of thing. So yeah, that's a system I thoroughly recommend for new time players, because it is so simple. And for experienced people who want to focus more on story than on turning to page 420 to find some obscure reference.
Thank you so much.
So that's one.
Sorry. Thank you so much to D Treadwolf for hitting that follow button, man. Welcome to the madness, my friend. Thank you for joining. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So was it the Lone Wolf? I've never played Lone Wolf, actually.
Yeah. So that's based on a series of books that he actually wrote in the 1980s, which was based on his role-playing game with his mates. So he released 25 books in total, choose your own adventure kind of books, and they had a combat mechanic in it, and that literally got translated from those original choose your own adventure books into a role-playing system. So that was really cool. And then another one that we're actually going to be playing pretty soon on our channel is Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition, and that looks to be a lot of fun. And maybe if I can just divert a little bit in terms of going with the flow. For the channel, we decided that we were going to shoot a really cheesy trailer where we got all the players together, dressed them up, shot them on green screen, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I think that channel, the trailer's coming out next week. But while we were filming the trailer, we're like, well, we need some bad guys. And okay, what are their powers? What are their things? What is this, that, and the next thing? And as we were shooting the trailer, as we were kind of making the trailer up as we went along, the world that the guys are going to be playing in was busy being created, not even in a gaming session. It was like, well, we need bad guys. What can we do in After Effects? It's fairly easy, but that looks cool on screen. Oh, we can do this, right? So now the bad guys have got these powers. So for me, just sort of the conversations we've been having about listening to the players, it's about listening to the players almost at any time, not just sitting around the table. It's like in the chats, WhatsApps, and all that kind of stuff as well. But Mutants and Masterminds is a great system if you want to do superhero kind of stuff.
I think for me, I probably have to bump Blades in the Dark by John Harper. It's a fun little one-page sort of narrative system. It's got a dice mechanic. I had John Harper on the show a couple weeks ago. He's a great guy. He's an independent RPG writer, and he's written like Lasers and Feelings and other things like that. But Blades of the Dark is a new system, just came out at Kickstarter, and it's really, really interesting. I know Adam Kobal is running a channel almost entirely dedicated to it. What's going on, Light Nevea? I hope that I said that right. How you doing? Welcome to the show. Yeah, so Blades in the Dark is really, really cool. And there's another channel we stopped by that was actually playing it that particular night. And Adam Colwell plays it, so, it's got to be decent. I haven't actually played it yet as a campaign, so I can't give you too much solid detail on it, but I've read it, and it was really good. It was really concise and well written, and John Harper is good at writing systems, so I trust him to make that awesome. And the other one that I would bump is not a system that you may think of if you are a D&D player, or it's not like Lone Wolf or Eminem, like you suggested. It's called Big Motherfucking Crab Truckers, and it's my favorite game ever, and I have not gotten a chance to play it on stream yet. Big Motherfucking Crab Truckers is a one-page RPG system where the players are big crabs that drive trucks, and the DM is the crab master, and the crabs worship the crab goddess, and that matters about as much as you want it to matter. And basically what happens is the crab master will come up with situations like you're driving your truck and it's like, oh no, you come up on the slick oil fields. You're losing control. What do you do? And basically what happens is the players have to tell a story, and they just keep building on it, telling a story using their background. Like, are you good at fighting? Are you good at this? Are you good at that? And they build on the story until someone at the table or the crab master stops believing, like, the story's no longer plausible, at which point he says, no fucking way. And then the player says, yes fucking way, and then you roll dice to see who's right.
That's awesome.
It is,
nice.
And I wish I had a chance to play it on stream. We may get a chance to sometime with this new group, but we'll see. It's such a funny and fun game, and I thank Ivan Van Norman for introducing it to me. It's amazing.
Nice. That's awesome. So 2 RPGs for me. One is called Story Cube, where the dice you use are these Story Cube dice. If you search for them on Amazon, they come up, and they have different pictures on their sides. And it's a generic system. You could use it to tell a superhero or a medieval fantasy or a game where you're all a bunch of big toys. It's like Fate in that respect. You can play whatever. And then you roll these dice, and you have to use the pictures on the dice to resolve your actions and tell the story that you're trying to tell. So if you're going to punch somebody in the face and you roll a basket of laundry, you have to figure out how to work that into the story. And it can be literal, it can be some sort of metaphor that you make with taking out the dirty laundry, that kind of thing. It's just a wild good time and really stretches the imagination. Obviously very rules light as far as all of that stuff goes. So Story Cube is definitely one that I would pick, and then the other one I have not played yet, but I was near a table of people who were playing this game, and I'm really, really interested in it. It's called Ninja Burger. And you work for you're a ninja who works for a burger delivery service, and wait.
Is that a ripoff of the game that they played in the Gamers?
It might be. Yeah. So
Samurai Pizza.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the idea is you have to deliver all your burgers in 30 minutes or less, or you commit seppuku.
That's exactly from the Gamers movie.
Yeah. So it is awesome. Check that out. I would say Story Cube and Ninja Burger are 2 of the lesser known. And then shout outs should also go to, if you haven't played them yet, Shadow of the Demon Lord. You should check out Keith Baker's new game, Phoenix Dawn Command, is amazing. So that's a game where you level up by dying, and then you come back stronger each time, but you can only die 7 times. So you have to be, it's like a interesting balance issue. And Lamentations of the Flame Princess, if you haven't played that, that is some scary stuff. So those are games I would recommend everybody check out.
I definitely want to. I haven't had a chance to, but I want to get in and at least try out Lamentations of the Flame Princess and also Shadow of the Demon Lord. I know both of them are like one of them is an OSR clone and the other is a I think is a 3. I think Demon Lord's a 3.5 clone, right?
No, it's more its own system. So I mean, you roll a d20 to resolve your actions, but you have different attributes and you have different stuff. But it is from Rob Schwalb, who worked on 3.5 a lot and on 4 a ton. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean clone as in like it's Pathfinder. Is a 3.5. I meant if you understood D&D 3.5, it pretty much plays exactly the same.
Yeah, in some respects, it's definitely more different than 13th Age, I would say. But yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah, I saw the rule books and that is totally up my alley, just with the artwork and stuff in there. So I am, it's one of those things where I'm looking for an excuse to get a chance to try it out, but I probably won't because I have too much other stuff on my plate, and I put a lot of markers like I'm gonna try this at some point, and I never get a chance to. But Pencil Stroke says thank you guys. So thanks both of you for discussing that and sharing those RPG suggestions with him. We had another question that I am looking for right now. Sorry, I heard something. Where is it?
It's Short Mania 444.
Yeah, probably. I can't find it in my
I know TPKs aren't very fun. That one?
Yeah. Go ahead and read that out.
I know TPKs aren't very fun, but what was the best way the entire party was killed, or where you had a player death that was very meaningful and made the story greater? I've never killed an entire party of people, but as far as good deaths go, I try to make every death meaningful in that sense. But I think my favorite death that I've ever had was when a player willingly sacrificed themselves, had a catastrophic dragon egg in 4th edition were basically bombs that could be used. So final session flew right at the big bad and detonated catastrophic egg while holding it to kill the big bad. It was an awesome, super duper meaningful sacrifice. So that's probably the best story I've had, and that was something the player sort of cleared it with me first, and then I have another death that just happened where we ended the session where essentially a player is in a contract and can get out of that contract with a warlock patron if they die and come back as another race. And so someone killed them with the intent of they, under their breath, cast reincarnate. So the rest of the party doesn't realize, but this person is coming back. So yeah. As a different race to get out of that contract. But we ended very dramatically, stabbed through the heart, boom, end of session. So it'll be fun when we get back to that session and that player comes back. And it looks like we lost Guy.
Yeah, I'm working to get him back. It's not a big deal. We will get him in just a second. It looks like he dropped out of the call, but he had to charge his phone because I guess he forgot to put his phone on the charger as he was using it to cast with. So I will jump in and answer. I have not actually TPK'd a party All that I can think of, I did kill one player, and I killed him on stream a couple months ago. What happened was and again, I very rarely kill players because if I can avoid it, I will push the things a little bit in their favor, just unless it's a particularly dramatic moment that really seems whatever. But we were on stream and the players were fighting this kind of nightmare beast, big armored kind of clawed horror in a cave, and they were level 2. Yeah, Trending says we'll probably be your first TPK. Probably not. I doubt it. But yeah, I was. They were fighting this thing, and they were getting their ass beat. Mostly because they weren't exploiting the fact that this thing could not actually move. It was too big to really move around the cave that it was in. It had no space to maneuver. And so they got right up in its face, and they were getting their asses kicked, and I had an NPC come in, a slightly higher level NPC come in and kind of fire some bow shots at this creature to pin it down so they could retreat. And one of the players, the rogue, decided not to do that. He was going to dive right in front of it to cover their retreat, and he took a crit right to the face for like 35 damage. And
wow.
Yeah, and unfortunately that damage was rolled like right out in the open, so there was really no way to fudge it or anything like that. He was just like, yeah, I'm pasted. And so he died like pretty outright. And welcome back, guy. It looks like we got you now. Hopefully you don't forget to charge your phone again. But no, so he got pasted, and the players basically grabbed his severed leg and his bleeding body, ran out of the cave after killing this beast, and they really didn't know what to do because they brought him back to town, and he lived in town. He had a mother and a sister in town that he lived with, and they saw his dead body, and they were like, our son is dead, we want to bury him. But the party behind the scenes was like, should we take the body and try and resurrect him? Like the family they want to bury him, so they were really conflicted about what to do. And they had just found this occult tome in the wizard's the wizard's treasure stash that this creature was guarding, and they used the knowledge and the language of a shadow being that they had freed in the wizard's dungeon to search the tome, find an occult ritual, not for resurrection, but actually to call across the void to petition a great old one, an elder god, to reach into the ether, grab this character's spirit from wherever it resides, pull it from wherever it was, and stuff it back into the body, specifically so they could talk to it. That was all the ritual was designed to do. And they ended up stealing the body, going out into this kind of ruin in the woods, and performing this ritual where they had to go through and do all these steps and stuff to perform this ritual to call across the void to this, or call across the veil, as the ritual was called. And when his soul was finally stuffed into the body and the body breathed life for a second, they cut the ritual off using a permanency scroll that they had looted from the wizard's house. And because of the permanency spell's interruption, it basically bound whatever spirit was stuffed into this body in there permanently, and it cut off its connection from the elder god. And so his character woke up. The problem was, as we had discussed off stream, it was not his spirit that got put back into his body, it was someone else's. Basically what was going to happen was this elder god was going to use its tentacle to sort of possess the spirit, put it in the body, and assume direct control, to use it to spread evil influence. But some benevolent spirit in the ether basically rushed in, grabbed a chunk of the player's spirit, and inhabited the body before the real spirit could go in. So it was like this stranger in the body with just a little sliver of the original character in there. And we were gonna go through the whole the rest of the campaign, not the full campaign, but we were gonna go for a while with the player sort of working, using his new soul siphoning power to hopefully try and rebuild his actual soul that he only had a sliver of left. What he didn't know, what the player didn't know, what no one in the party knew, was that the spirit that had saved him was actually this player's deceased brother, the one that he had followed in the footsteps of to become an adventurer. And that was the one who had kind of sacrificed himself to bring this player back to life, basically. And it was the only time I've ever killed a character and had them come back to life in a game, and I was lucky enough that the story allowed it in such an interesting way.
Are you guys discussing killing off party members or the whole party?
Yeah, we had a question specifically about TPKs and/or player deaths.
I've had it happen once, but I'm very reluctant to let it happen. I don't like killing characters, so I'll give them as many roles and opportunities and skill checks and things that I can to try and keep them alive. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But what we did in terms of a total party kill was we'd been running a campaign for about 2 years, and 3 of the guys, it was a party of 5. 3 of them were literally leaving the country to go and work in Canada and the United Arab Emirates and that kind of thing. So we decided that we were going to bring the whole campaign to a conclusion. And the thread that the campaign had been taking was that they were being used by the gods to enact the gods' will on the planet. And the guys eventually ended up in a battle scenario on different planes and different areas and things, where they came to the realization that unless they sacrificed themselves, things would happen. So the battles were epic. They went in knowing that they couldn't win, but they went in to either delay things or to change the outcome of certain events to keep the world that they had been living in going. So when it happened, everyone was very, very happy with that conclusion because they felt it was a very satisfactory conclusion with all their characters dying. I think if a character dies needlessly and you've been going for several months and people have invested a lot of time, it can be depressing.
Yeah. My thought is, by the way, I don't know if you guys do this. It was completely an accident that I had this character die at level 2. Like it's not something I wanted to happen. It just, you rolled a crit right in front of everyone and the player's already like crumpling up his character sheet. There's not a whole lot you can do to say, wait, no, it doesn't smash you to pieces. Like, if the player's already accepted that and already kind of said, yes, this is what happens, and moved on, you as a DM can't really do anything to walk that back. But generally, I always try and keep a little bit of plot armor around the players for at least the first few levels, because while we know that in like D&D, specifically 3.5 and Pathfinder and some other systems, early levels can be extremely lethal. Like, you take one good hit and you're on the ground. The problem always becomes that character that the player's playing, the first one they come up with for the campaign, is always the one they want to play, and anything they have to make after that one dies is going to be the one they want to play slightly less. So anything you can do to keep them playing the character that they want to be playing, even if it means fudging your rolls just a little bit to keep them alive for the first few levels, just so they can then actually enjoy for a bit, and then you can kind of, okay, now there's actual threat going on, and now you guys are actually kind of fighting for your own lives.
Do you ever have players saying, can we put down a save point at this point? Can we save the game here so we can make decisions?
No. I actually suggested that once, though, because we were playing... Okay, so this was way back, and you remember that guy that I described, who was the DM that I said on Roll20, I never want to be like? Like I said, he was a good DM. He had a problem, and his problem was he would screw with combats just a little bit, just so it would always ruin us. we played an encounter that should have been, we were at level 1. It should have been against one big boar. One big boar is a decent challenge for a party of 4 level 1s. He decided to throw in another boar. And so, like, you have one boar that comes barreling out of the woods, hits a player, that player drops unconscious, and we're like, oh shit, it's a boar, and we're scrambling to fight it, and then another boar comes barreling out of the woods and smacks another player who goes unconscious, and now it's a death spiral. He liked to do that. So in a dungeon, I'm not going to drop the whole story on it, but basically what happened was all the NPCs somehow zipped into this room right as combat started. Don't know how that worked out. It was just a DM being dumb thing. And then my character, the fighter, got color sprayed by the wizard in the party. So we died. we lost. And this was the second campaign in a row that we had died at level 3. And so we literally said, "Hey man, do you want to just get roll back time a little bit to the beginning of this dungeon level so maybe that doesn't happen, because we don't want to start a new campaign. This is the second one we've started. Maybe we just redo this fight." And we ended up playing something else. But it's like, yes, I've asked for that in jest once, but no one's ever suggested it seriously.
Serious. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know Trendane said it. Yeah. Trendane says if that's the way the dice roll, I have no problem losing a character. It can be sad, but that's the way the fates had it. In theory, yeah. But honestly, I'd much and this even if a player tells me, hey, if the dice roll badly, I'm fine with my character dying. Even if a player tells me that, I still know, there's still no reason to take away a character that they enjoy playing. Because if they're gonna have more fun playing that character, I'd rather they do that than try and work out something else they hopefully have as much fun playing, but they might not, because it's oh, the character I really enjoyed that I made specifically, he died, now I gotta make something different, and I don't want to be something I'd much rather just tweak the knobs behind the scenes just to keep you having fun without having to bring everything to a halt. Yes, if there's a dramatic moment or there's some kind of screw up and one player dies and he may get resurrected or something, that's fine. But I try not to have player or players die, only because very rarely does it serve the story very well. If anything.
Oh yeah, and.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, whenever somebody dies during a random encounter, we were storming the castle and it was right here at the gates. It was an unlucky critical or that kind of thing. That's not super fun to me. The one thing I will say is that if you are playing in Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or that kind of thing, and you're in that world where death is not the end because you're high enough level and you have enough diamond dust or whatever it is, that if you want to make death meaningful, there's this other side of the coin there where it's I'll just come back and, who cares? I'll be at -1 for a couple days and then I'm back to whatever, or however the system handles it. Feel free to make it meaningful in some way. What happens? Maybe the character goes to the heavens and now they're pulled back and they're depressed like Buffy, or maybe there's something that happens to them. Their soul gets snatched when they die and they're brought to a plane where time passes differently. And when they're put back in their body, they've experienced 100 years of torture on a windswept plane or something, and how will that change their character? I think that's another important thing to keep in mind with character death, is that when you get to a point where it's easy to bring a person back, you also want to make that meaningful. And don't kill off players in random encounters unless your whole group is cool with that, because it's just frustrating and disappointing when that happens.
Can I make an aside there, because there's an interesting point that I wanted to talk about. And when you said you have a player die, but he's going to come back, and you should sort of sit down and talk to the player. Okay, so you experienced 100 years of torture in hell, even though it was only an hour or so in the real world. you know, your character is changed and mentally scarred and stuff, like, you know, when he comes back. Which, one of the things that I'm huge on in D&D is character arcs. I love building character arcs with players. And I don't know, I'm interested to know how you guys go about not necessarily yourself, but helping players think in terms of and craft those character arcs. Because one of the things I really like to do is, I always like to have players create a character for a new campaign, saying like, okay, so you have no idea the events of the campaign, you can't predict them, I don't even want you to try. All I want you to do is build a character that you think would be interesting to play, and hopefully has a goal, something he wants to accomplish. And that goal shouldn't necessarily have something to do with the campaign. If the campaign is going to be about slaying the evil lich at the top of the mountain castle, you shouldn't build a level 1 player whose dream is to slay a lich, because that's just dumb. Like, it's too on the nose. Like, his goal should be, I don't know, to be the best swordsman in the world or something like that, or to be, you know, to acquire great wealth and buy himself a castle. Like, he should have a goal that matters to his character, and then once we have that goal in mind, we will start playing. And then in a couple levels, or after a little while, when he has experienced events of the campaign, things that obviously you could not account for when you're creating your character, I like taking players aside, usually at like level 5 or something, and say, okay, so your character had a goal, he had priorities, he had dreams, he had things he wanted out of life, and now you've experienced events, things have happened to him that you couldn't necessarily predict. How have these events shaped your character's priorities? Is his goal still the same as it was? Is his, like, he's learned of goblins in the hills, is his priority now to protect this village that he's in? Or, like, does he still want to be the best swordsman in the world? And, you know, like, and I like to come back and return to it and ask the player, like, where are we now? Has anything changed? What are we focusing on? What's your... So, because there's always the tendency to make a level 1 character, but have the personality of a level 20 character. You know, you come in at level 1 with your story already completed, and it's like, that's not the point of the game. The point of the game is to find out who you're going to be at level 20. You shouldn't be a complete character, a completely fleshed out, like, you're not Drist at level 1, you know? So how do you guys handle things like that?
Well, from my side, one of the things that I've done on the channel for my viewers, which details trying to create a character that has the scope for what you're talking about, because I've encountered lots of players who go, well, he's a farm boy and he's a soldier and he wields a long sword. That's my backstory. That's my character. And you go, well, you can take it a little bit further. No, I'm not creative, or I'm not inventive, or I'm not. Other people can have backstories. I just want to kind of participate. And what I do is I encourage people to basically go back to the model that we use in script writing for TV series and for feature films. And there are a couple leading questions that you ask your character at character creation, and the simplest one is it starts with, who are your parents? And you kind of go, well, what the hell does that have to do with whether I'm a wizard or a starship captain or a whatever? And the answer is, it doesn't actually have anything to do with it. But the point is, your character, as you rightly say, does not start out at level 1 preparing to be the captain of a star destroyer or a legendary dragon slayer, right? They start off as the son of a miller or a guard captain in a small town. And those leading questions, there are about 8 of them or so that you kind of use as a structural base, lead you to answer and to get to a point where you say, well, actually, at this moment in time, at this exact moment in time, this is who my character is, and this is their kind of goals, and these are their wants, and it helps bring it down to a level 1 perspective. So there isn't this grandiose kind of plan, as you say. And what we then do is I sit with my characters when they're creating. I sit with my players when they're I sit with my players when they're creating their characters. Pardon me, and make sure that we build in a couple hooks that we can use later on. And the hooks we leave fairly open. So they've got quite a structured backstory. They know where they're coming from. They know kind of what their short-term goals are and what their focus is at this point. But a character, one of the guys came up with a story where he said, I'm a god from a town, and I was given a box to take from the town to another town. And whilst on the road between the two towns, I was ambushed, and these thieves stole the box from me. And I haven't gone back to my original town because I'm afraid that I'll get into trouble for losing the box. So I'm trying to track down this box. But that's as far as we went in terms of exploring what the box was and what was in the box, why he was delivering it from point A to point B was just an order. But who ordered him to do it and why were they doing it? That we've left open. So we can explore that over time and ultimately get to a point where he opens the box and discovers that either there's nothing in it or there's something of world importance. So that's the route we take, is leading questions to begin with.
I like that. I don't necessarily know those screenwriting questions, which I would love to actually see if they're written up anywhere, because it's a fantastic tip, and I definitely want to, if possible, refine my method, because my method has always been like, when a player hands me a character sheet or a backstory, I ask a shitload of questions, and mostly they're questions that hopefully the player has not thought about their character, like, you know, how they feel about certain things, or what, you know, where they are right now, what their immediate goals are, what's their day-to-day life like. I like to get specifics in there, but, you know, I just ask questions that come up in my head. And also, one of the things I tend to do is I tend to pare down backstories. Like, I'll encourage a player to cut out whole details, like things that I think fill too much space and don't make, for example, one player gave me a backstory about this dude who was, like, in and out of jail and doing all these criminal things, and, like, he got arrested, and then he was in a gang, and then he was doing this, and I'm like, I would cut most of this out because you don't need all that. You can get all the idea across in, like, one or two of these things, and we can flesh out the rest later. Like, we can come up with all that other stuff, but you don't need to have, like, someone came to me once with, like, he had killed a vampire in his backstory before he got to the town at level 1, and it's like, probably not. But there was a thing that happened to me a long time ago, and this is interesting because it's related to what you were talking about. I wish more players would do this, but very few ever have. One player, and this was when I was a brand new DM, one of my players came to me and he said, "Hey man, I have a character." I don't even remember what the character was, but he says, when we go somewhere new, he's going to ask someone, maybe a bartender, maybe someone around town, if they've seen a man with a burned face. And he says, I don't know. Now imagine when he's saying this, it's in like a thick Georgian accent, like the Russian Georgian, not the state. But he's a thick Ukrainian accent, and he says, I want to know about the man with the burned face. And he says, I don't know who this guy is. I don't care who he is. I don't care where he is in the story or what his he has something, like he killed my family or something, and I just want revenge. And he says, everything else you can make up. And so he did, and he just started asking around town, and at first I had no idea. I'm like, no, I haven't seen a man with a burned face. But as he kept asking this question, I kept thinking, like, okay, well, where can I fit this into the story? And eventually I found a place to fit it in, and it made sense, but it's like, it was such a throwaway thing that a player just came to me and asked, and it's like, if a player comes to you and says, hey, I'm gonna do this thing, and I don't know what it means, and I don't know what it adds up to, that's up to you, surprise me. I think if more players did that, they would find that them and the DMs could work out a storyline that surprises everyone, and is probably a lot more interesting than anything you could sort of just write, like, oh, he ran from bandits and they killed his family, you know? Like, that's so much more powerful if you figure that out as we go.
Sure.
Well, it's emergent, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a few different thoughts about it, and like my whole thing is, if somebody has the goal of I want to be the world's most legendary dragon slayer, and they come from humble beginnings, I'm actually fine with that, because when you look at I look at it like there's Luke Skywalkers who, when they leave Tatooine, say, I'm going to go become a Jedi, and then don't become a Jedi until the final movie, but they have that goal. I think that's a pretty traditional thing. Farm boy leaves home with aspirations of becoming a hero, then becomes big hero, right? But then I also think that doesn't have to be that way for everybody. There's also Han Solos who have no intention of being a hero, who have no intention of doing anything other than paying off their gambling debts, or paying off their smuggling debts, whatever it is, and they find then, like, oh, hey, there's this cute girl, I might stick around for a while. Hey, oh, you know what? Oops, I'm saving the world. That was an accident. I didn't mean to do that, but now I'm invested in it. So, and then I'm also, as far as players go, I have one player who, I kid you guys not, gives me a 30-page backstory whenever we start a new session.
Do you read it?
I do.
I would literally, I'd probably throw it in the garbage and tell him I read it.
Well, and it's, I don't mind. So that's probably one thing is that I'm sure if I told him, like, I needed this smaller, or I'm not going to use any of this, he would throw it out. But I do use it, and I do read it. And then I also, from some people, I get, an email with 3 sentences. And I use that just as much. So if you're a player out there, and you want to save yourself some work, and you want to save your DM some reading time, I definitely recommend, go answer a couple of questions real quick and figure the rest out from there. But if you want to jump into a game with a fully realized character and 30 pages of backstory, and your DM's okay with it, because remember, asking somebody to read 30 pages of your amateur writing is homework that you're giving to somebody else. I think that's also fine, and that it takes all, like, the most interesting adventuring parties are, a mix of old man who has already done a bunch of stuff, and young woman who's leaving town with aspirations of overthrowing the evil queen and becoming her, and dude who's just in it for the money. That party makes, like, a super interesting story, and is proven in cinema and that kind of thing. So
I think just on the subject of the 30-page backstory, honestly, if anything, I probably would throw it out, but more likely I'd tell the player, like, hey man, I'm not going to read 30 pages. Can you do me a favor and bullet point the things that are most important to you? Because here's the thing, and this is actually one of the things I love doing as a DM, is whenever I'm starting a new campaign, I love taking a setting book. Like, I usually use published settings, so they come with, like, a book that the players can reference or read that'll tell them what they need to know about the cultures and this and that. And I love handing them that book and then seeing which areas of this setting and culture and stuff each player hones in on, because everyone will go and find in a detail that's important to them, that's unique to them. Like, some players will hone in on this tribal culture, while some might hone in on these law protectors over here, whatever. Everyone picks out different things. So if I'm reading 30 pages of backstory, I will most likely the things that I pick out as the most important will probably not be the same things that the player has in mind as being the most important. So I'd rather just say, hey man, just give me a bulleted list of all the things that you want me to take away from this short story / novel that you wrote, and I'll just use those, because that's a lot easier for me to reference than, oh shit, I gotta flip through pages to find that one detail that this guy wants me to remember. Just a bulleted list is fine. It's cool. You don't need to write prose. You can write that and then keep it for yourself. I don't mind, but I don't need it.
Sure, yeah, but I think this player in particular enjoys writing it. You know what I mean? And this is part of the game that
I'm
he
not saying they
enjoys. So
shouldn't write it. I'm saying they should
Yeah.
write it and not give it to me as character notes. They should give it to someone else as like, here's a story I wrote about my character. Like, just give me the notes. I need the Cliff's notes, not the book.
And see, and again, I'm not telling people they should write a book. I think it's great to get the Cliff Notes. If I got 30 pages from every player, right,
Oh, yeah.
I'd have way too much to read. But I like that there is one player who does that. And so for me, the fact that it takes all kinds, and then I can go in there, and even if he doesn't think something's important in his backstory, well, it might turn out that it is. And then when he's like, well, what is this? I could be like, hey, you wrote it. It's in here. This is your creation. So there's always that to go off of too. But I agree. Definitely check with your DM before you do too much work.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I did want to hit some other questions here, but I know I had passed a couple. No, that was that. Fix It Geek says I try to encourage my players to come up with multiple character ideas, and it's so hard to keep track of this while it keeps moving on me.
I just saw a favorite setting, right? Was one of them?
One of them says how do you deal with insanities of player characters like Malkavian Vampire, for example? I don't know. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Vampire, the Masquerade. I try. My only rule with character quirks like insanity is, don't write something that's gonna act it like at no point should you ever be writing a character that is probably gonna come in conflict with the party, or just straight up be really irritating or annoying to the party. Like the party shouldn't be there to do the quest and also put up with this guy. It's like they don't, we're all here to have fun, and you should always be creating a character that is designed to be played within a party. That's not to say you can't roleplay a character who has a certain insanity or other sort of phobias or other kind of things that inhibit them in some way or make them kind of quirky and abnormal. It's just that those things should only ever come up in a way that enhances the character. Like if you're gonna say, I have a player who's cripplingly claustrophobic, and then every time the party's like, hey, it's time to go into the dungeon, he's sitting there like, I can't go into the dungeon, guys, it's too scary. And then you're like, okay, this character's probably not really worth the trouble. Like we don't need to sit and give this guy a pep talk every single time we have to go into the dungeon. That's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, I remind people all the time, this is a collaborative effort. If you're playing a one-on-one, sure, go ahead, make the crazy, because you're only affecting yourself. But if you are sitting around with other people, you got to take them into account. I mean, yes, you want to play characters that you're interested in playing, and you want to maybe try interesting characters, but it might only be interesting for you, and everybody else is just getting bored. So absolutely, I think there's a limit to where you can push your experimentation of phobias, insanities, and that kind of thing. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, 100% agree with all that for sure.
Yeah, never make a character who is like a loner, in the sense that like they try and be alone, because it's like, why? I had that once. I had a player play a character that insisted that they were not part of the party, and then they ended up breaking into the party's hotel room, inn room, to steal back a dagger that they had thrown into combat and the party had picked up, and the party woke up. And so, oh shit, there's an intruder in our room, and they chased her out of the inn, and then when they caught her, they basically had no choice but to pummel her unconscious and turn her into the guards, because they didn't know. And that did not end well. Pencil Stroke says, question, dungeon or open world? And I don't necessarily know what this means, because it could go in a couple different ways. I don't know if that means, like, sandbox or not sandbox, or if they actually mean, like, dungeons or, like, hex crawl. Pencil Stroke's gonna have to clarify that a little bit, because I don't understand the question. There's just slightly too little information.
Yeah. I mean, I love a good dungeon crawl, but for me, it's all about your story. And so if you can tell a great self-contained story in a dungeon, awesome. But I think gone are my days of going from room to the next, killing a thing and taking its stuff, being as entertaining for me as, like, telling a story, be it grand or be it on a very small, bubble gumshoe style scale. I would much rather do something like that than just break and enter, So if the dungeon crawl's got a great story, awesome. If the open world has a great story, awesome.
I think one of the things to think about in terms of that exact answer is that people don't realize, I think, or perhaps they don't use it, is that if you're playing in a science fiction kind of game, your starship is pretty much a dungeon. Yes, you're flying around to different planets and things, but there's a lot of stuff that's based on the starship, which is basically like having a portable dungeon, really. But again, it does depend on exactly what the question is.
Now, he says, I mean literally open world, like towns and landscape, but I don't think I've ever been in a campaign that doesn't have an open landscape. I mean, that's just kind of part of D&D. I mean, I currently, Curse of the Crimson Throne that I DM on Fridays is a campaign that takes place entirely within one large city, but it's still, like, it's not a court, like, it's not like when you're talking about, like, video games, you have, like, the open world game where there's, like, corridors, but it's, I don't know. There was a question that I had on this list, and I wanted to read it, but I lost it here. I guess. It says, how do you avoid railroading your players, and how would you instruct a new DM not to railroad? I have a little bit of an opinion on this. I'll let you guys take it.
I think what Guy said earlier about not over preparing is great, because you become so committed to stuff that you pour hours into, and Guy, you probably know this as a screenwriter, right? That, like, you get used to killing your darlings pretty quick, and I think it's the same thing in D&D. You just have to be willing to throw stuff out and know that, like, hey, this idea that I wrote out, or this monster I used, or this dungeon I drew, whatever it is, I might be able to use later. I might be, maybe tonight's not the night, but another night I'll be able to use this. So yeah, I would say make sure, don't do too much prep, and also trust that, like, if you're playing with your friends, everybody wants to have a good time, everybody wants to succeed. Have faith in that, and then, like, and remember that your players should be driving the story, not you. So, like, that old improv adage of yes and, that someone makes an offer, a story offer, you accept it, and then you build on it. And that's your job as a DM, is to continue to build things, place obstacles in their way, but let them be the ones to drive the car, and you just decide what's along the road, essentially.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think something to build on that, in terms of acknowledging that things are going to change, is if you understand the plan that you have, and this is something that I speak about a lot on my channel. If, for example, you've kind of planned that there's a villain who's going to be ransacking a castle, and the players should be involved in preventing that from happening. And the players say, "Oh no, we don't go anywhere near that town. We turn around, and we head south." You kind of go, "Huh, okay, that's interesting." You got two options. One, all of a sudden, there's a town in the south that they're going to come across who has exactly the same villain who's doing exactly the same thing, right? So your plans haven't changed. It's just a function of flexible geography, right? So that's the one way of doing it. But sometimes you don't have that option. What I then remind people to do is you can just go back and say, well, what's the villain trying to actually do? Oh, he's trying to burn down the village. If the players don't intervene, he burns down the village. But what then happens? They're going to get refugees coming from that village. They're going to get people going to go and try and save the village. Or people looking for people who burnt down the village. So by knowing what the big plan is, even in broad strokes, you can, I think, adapt your story and go, okay, well, they didn't stop this. What are the ramifications? And then what story comes out of that one? I don't know if that's avoiding railroading because your story's moved on, but yeah, that's certainly my approach. Is if I've planned something and they don't want to do it, well, either I move them to where it is, or it moves to where they are, or they deal with the fallout.
Yeah, that's great.
My opinion on railroading is always a little bit weird. Again, this is because I'm a little bit different than a lot of DMs, where a lot of DMs are the kind of people who will start with like a blank campaign and just homebrew the plot and what happens every session and the world around them and stuff. And I am not very... I've always said, and people have always found it weird, homebrewing is not exactly... It never really turned my gears. It never really got me going as much as other things in the DM process did. Like, I like setting up an adventure and planning things out and writing like connections in a story more than I do like building a whole world and and creating hopefully an interesting setting. Because to me, it's always been like, unless I'm doing something really out of the box, this generic fantasy setting is just as good as this generic fantasy setting, and I don't really like if I use one of the other Forgotten Realms or Golarion or I don't know Kryn or Discworld or whatever. Like, it's not going to matter that much to me. So I run a lot of published adventures, modules, adventure paths, and that, but which means there's already technically a preset plot. So a lot of what I end up doing is oh man, someone's telling me the music is literally like as low as it can go. I don't know what to tell you guys. Sorry about that. I tend to do a lot of editing and a lot of writing the campaign so that the players are making the plot move, but it's still going in the direction that it's sort of designed to go. But they're still making the choices there. So my opinion on railroading is it's kind of always a necessary thing. Like, you will always be doing it to some small degree, but the only difference being that, the only thing you really ever want to avoid is putting up a barrier of some sort and saying to the players, like, no, it's not time to go here now. I think the good version of railroading, and it's always used as sort of a negative term, but the good version of railroading is always providing a story and providing clue. And we talked about like using an NPC to provide clues or direction or something. Like, if you do that well, the players will feel like they're making the choices to go here and to do this and to progress the story. And I've had players come to me after a session being like, hey man, I'm sorry we killed that guy, or I'm sorry we ran off and did this thing because I'm sure it derailed your campaign. And my only thought in the back of my head is like, no, that's exactly what I intended you to do. That's what the plot was, that's what was prepared for you guys. But they wanted to make that choice because we're sort of like, it's a little bit of a give and take process, but we're all kind of working together to make sure that the choices they're making are the ones they want to make. They never feel like they're forced to go here and do this because it's the next thing in the plot. That's me. I mean, I'm down on railroading as much as the next guy, but I also see it in a way as something that's almost entirely necessary, because I don't generally run campaigns where, like, I don't run sandbox campaigns where the players can just go wild and adventure off this way and then turn a corner and adventure off this way. Like, I like things to be a little bit more tight and a little bit more focused narrative-wise, because it works a little bit better for me. So, I don't know, maybe I'm railroader extraordinaire. Who knows? Maybe. I have no idea.
Well, I think players, again, it comes down to like having respect for your fellow players, and your DM is a player. So when your DM throws an obvious plot hook your way, saying like, we're going to go this way, is a big middle finger to your DM. And so I feel like, that kind of thing, yes, players should be able to do whatever they want, right? But they should also like be kind of cool to the story you're going to tell, and put a little prep time into. Yeah. So I totally agree with that.
There's a thing, and I don't know if you've ever done this on your channel, Guy, but I think one of the things I kind of jokingly tell players is, if you like your DM, if you enjoy what he's doing, the most flattering thing you can do as a player is to bite the plot hook, even if it's obvious and even if you see it coming. Like, just once in a while, just humor him a little bit, because maybe there's something cool in it for you. Because I think a lot of players are conditioned to, like, when they can see, oh, he's feeding us a plot hook, we need to subvert that, and we need to not do it because we got to do something else.
Absolutely. What I call it on my channel is it's the player contract and the GM contract, and there we go. We got a finger. And they swing in both directions. Players need to sometimes go, okay, yes, here's a porcupine, we're going to swallow it. It's an expression we have down here.
That makes sense. I can see how that's already an expression.
We're going to swallow it. We see it, we accept it. By the same token, the game master or the DM, or what we're going to call them, needs to also see that players are interested in biting into that vampiric heart, and they really want to see where it goes. So as the game master, I'm going to be flexible and go in that direction as well.
Yeah.
So we talk about those contracts, social contracts, really, in terms of bringing about that harmony. But look, I mean, it is always going to happen. Players are going to pick up on clues and things that you think are obvious as to where they should go, and they will misinterpret it and go in a different direction. That's not players being sort of malicious or wanting to derail it. It's just players being players. And on the railroading, I mean, that's something that you have to plan for, or at least you have to anticipate it's going to happen, and you can't actually plan for it because you have no idea how they're going to misinterpret the dead body on the floor.
Yeah, what I like to do is I will lay down like a plot. Like, a lot of DMs tell me they don't do this. They don't plan like a chapter's worth of plot or what's gonna happen. And what I like to do is I like to when I'm planning a plot, I plan little vignettes, little events. Like, this is an event where they discover a thing, like a perfume shop is actually a front for a criminal organization. This is an event where they run into a mob in the street that's killing were-rats disguised as people. This is an event where they go into the sewers and they fight a bunch of things. Like, these are just little vignettes. And I don't actually care what happens during that event. Like, once they get there, I don't care how they handle it. I don't really care whether they choose to let people live or whether they settle it violently and stuff. Like, that's up to them, and we'll work out the consequences when they happen. And, to be honest, I don't actually care what happens between those events, because as long as the players are doing something, we can find a way to get them into a scene and link that scene to something else. All I really care, I don't care too much what they do, because they're gonna do things and I'm gonna react, and the what of that is almost irrelevant. Maybe they're gonna be nice and ask for information, maybe they're gonna go beat a guy in an alley until he gives up a name. But both of those things are actually kind of irrelevant from a plot perspective, in that both of those things are just a way to advance to the next clue, and yes, both have different fall-off consequences, but we write those into the story a little bit down the line, and we use those to shape the obstacles, for their progression in the future. But as long as they're doing something to progress, that's fine by me. I'm happy. I will give them things to do and obstacles in the way, but I always want them to be making a choice to progress. I never want them to be sitting on their laurels or saying, you know what, this is kind of boring, let's go off and leave this city and go find an adventure somewhere else. Like, if either of those happen, then I feel like as a DM I've probably failed somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
So, man, it is about 10:45 right now. I think we're kind of winding down, and we have had some great questions in chat. And I thank you everyone for hanging out on this extra long fuzzy dice show. So why don't we kind of bring it down a little bit and start wrapping things up a bit. Before I get into my last minute announcements and discussions, I want to give a huge thanks to both of my guests, these dudes on either side of me, James Introcaso and Guy Sclanders, two awesome DMs, and I hope, by the way, I hope you guys had a good time hanging out here and discussing DM stuff with me. I know I certainly had a good time. So why don't we start on this side with James, and tell everyone a little bit about who you are, where they can find you on the internet, what kind of stuff you get up to, this and that.
Sure. Well, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, wow. I'm getting ahead of myself. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, I have two podcasts on the Tome Show Network. One called The Roundtable, which is a weekly panel D&D news show where we get players of all perspectives to comment on the latest RPG news. And then Gamer to Gamer, which is like a fresh air for game designers, authors, other people who work in the tabletop world. And then I actually have another podcast that I am super, super excited to talk about. I make it with my friend Rudy Basso. It's actually his brainchild. It's called Have Spellbook Will Travel. It is a bi-weekly fantasy radio play that is based on our D&D game. So it's not an actual play podcast. Everything is scripted. Episodes are between 20, 25 minutes long. It's a comedy. I think you'll really, really like it if you love to play tabletop RPGs. We play on a lot of tropes and jokes and stuff there. So check out Have Spellbook Will Travel. And then I also have a blog, worldbuilderblog.me, where I talk about the 5th edition setting I'm building. That's all based on the age of exploration in our own world. So, there's been discovery of an enormous land mass, and it sort of throws the rest of the world into this sort of land-hungry grab and stuff like that. Check out my adventure, The Master's Vault, on Roll20, and if you are going to Gen Con, give me a shout out. Maybe I can see you there. Play one of the Bald Man Games adventures. I wrote that one too. So I've got a lot of stuff going on. Thanks for letting me plug it. And Brian, thank you so much for having me on. Guy, it was amazing talking to you. This was a blast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, and feel free to drop, if you're hanging out in chat, feel free to drop any links to those things you want. I should probably make guest macros with all the links and stuff, but I always forget. So if you want to drop some links, otherwise, they should all be on screen right over here. His Twitter, his website, his podcast, all that stuff right over there. And again, thank you, James, for hanging out. It has been great. And Guy, what about you? You do a whole bunch of stuff on the internet.
Yeah, I've got two channels. I won't lie, I don't make them on my own. I might be the face and voice of them, but I've got two wonderful people who help me do it. That's Carla and Derek, whom I will scream at as Web Goblin and Marketing Goblin, respectively, who bring these channels to life for me on social media and on the web. Website's www.greatgamemaster.com, which links all of the different channels together. But we've basically got three different areas. How to be a great game master, which looks at, pretty much the same stuff we've been talking about here. How to be a great player, which looks at it from the player's perspective. How to do what you need to do to play the game properly. And then we run Bacon Battalion, which is our gaming session that we run every Sunday. Using Pathfinder, we're shifting over to Dungeons & Dragons 5th Ed shortly. We're going to be running Mutants and Masterminds in there. And we do system reviews where we play new RPGs that have come out, and we kind of look at them from we've just got the book. Can we play it in 10 minutes? And what do we kind of feel about that? So all of that's all on YouTube. That's kind of where we play. And big thanks to both of you guys. It has been a great, very early morning for us, but lots of fun doing it. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, and once again, thank you guys for being here. Before we bounce out of here, I just want to remind everyone, you are hanging out here on the Exploding Dice channel, where we have live D&D every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can see it down below on that corner with the schedule. We are just kicking off Session 1 of our Jade Regent campaign. That is starting this coming Sunday. We just had some session prep and stuff this past Sunday because we weren't playing a game, and we are getting kicked off with that. We've got my good friend Trendane, who is one of the players, modding for us in chat, and we have some other people. We have Ashley from the Two Dwarfs TV podcast and the guys from Totally Tweaked TV. They are my players and my cast for that show. Also, you remember, if you want more D&D, you can catch me on the Encounter Roleplay channel, where on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, I play Call of Cthulhu with some amazing roleplayers and dudes. It is a great time, and we are on our way to Africa to uncover a cult. There was a plane crash over the ocean this past session, and we almost all died. And also, we just started a game called Outlanders. We were all teleported into a weird land full of walrus people and harpies that live in a giant steampunk tree. It's weird and it's great. Sunday, that clashes with D&D High Rollers. Well, you can tell Mark Holmes that I have a better stream. No, Mark Holmes and Mark Holmes is a cool guy. He's a friend of mine, an amazing friend. We have our differences, mostly over who's got a better stream, but you should definitely hang out here because you can catch him on replay. What else? Oh, if you guys enjoyed the show, which I hope you did, please consider following Michael O's lead and becoming a patron, supporting us on Patreon. It's !Patreon in chat, as Dice Thulu will link you right there. You can pledge anywhere from $1 on up, and every dollar that you guys pledge goes right back into making this channel better, paying some of our bills, and helping provide awesome D&D content like the Fuzzy Dice Show, where we have great guests like these two every single week. I just want to give a quick shout out to next week's guest, because I know you guys like this show and I know you want to be here next week when I hang out with Mike Shea from Sly Flourish blog. He is awesome, and he just came out with his new Fantastic Locations book, and I have read it, and it is really, really good, and we will be talking about that next week. So Mike Shea's going to be here hanging out. Hopefully you're going to be here hanging out, and as always, don't let Dice Thulu get his tentacles on you, because you know he gets kind of handsy. And one last question, Petrol Stroke insists as we all sign off, what would be your useless superpower?
My useless superpower would be to levitate 1 inch off the ground.
My useless superhero power would be to generate about 4 square inches of felt cloth out of my fingertips.
Oh man, and I think my useless superpower would be to make the best segues in podcasting history. Every segue I made would be amazing, world class, and that's all I could do well. So thank you everyone for hanging out. I had a great time. I hope you did too. Please tune in for the rest of the shows during the week. Follow our awesome guests on Twitter. And thank you all for hanging out. I will catch you next week. Don't let Dice Thulu get his tentacles on you, because he gets real handsy. Take care, everyone.